I never thought I'd be that guy, the one who shows up to Christmas with a trunk full of gifts, only to be treated like the forgotten mailman. But here we are. My name's Mark, I'm 35, and until recently, I was the guy who kept the lights on in a house I didn't even live in. Technically, it was my sister's house, or at least, that's what she told everyone. To them, she was the hard-working single mom who clawed her way into a suburban 4-bedroom dream. But to the bank, and more importantly, to me, I was the name on the mortgage. She was the one who moved in after her divorce, with her 2 kids and a sob story about starting over. And I, being the fool with a decent job and a bleeding heart, offered to help her get back on her feet. That was 5 years ago. In the beginning, I didn't mind. She was my sister, you know? Family. And watching her struggle with daycare, grocery bills, and deadbeat child support payments, I figured it was the least I could do. I bought the house in my name, let her live in it rent-free, and paid the mortgage every month like clockwork. She promised she'd take over once she was financially stable. We even pinky swore over a pizza box one night. I still remember the grease stain near the signature line when I drew up the informal agreement, just a placeholder until she could refinance. But the months turned into years, and her promises turned into deflections. Next tax season. After I pay off the car. Once the kids are in school. Always another reason. Still, I didn't push. I figured pushing made me the bad guy, and in our family, I was always the nice one. Not the golden child, that was Emma. Emma could light the curtains on fire and my mom would call it creative. But I was dependable. Boring. The one who filled in the gaps when everyone else fell short. Need someone to fix the fence? Call Mark. Car won't start? Ask Mark. Christmas party? Mark bring the food and the folding chairs. This year, I even wrapped the presents myself. Thoughtful ones, too, none of that regifted candle nonsense. I got her son the Lego set he'd been begging for since July, her daughter a Kindle with preloaded books I curated myself. And Emma? A new espresso machine. Fancy. She loves her morning coffee and made some comment in October about the one she had being on its last legs. I stored it all in my trunk, triple-checked the bows, then drove across town through a snowstorm to be there by noon. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed extra cars. Cousins. Friends of friends. Probably her ex-husband's sister too. Emma always did like keeping things awkward. I knocked and let myself in, like always. The front room was full of people, lights twinkling, someone already carving the ham. Emma was standing by the tree in a deep green sweater, a glass of wine in one hand and her phone in the other. She looked up, blinked like I was a glitch in her system, and then smiled. But it wasn't the kind of smile you get when someone's glad you're there. It was small. Tight. "Oh," she said, brushing past me to grab something off the counter. "Hey, didn't realize you were coming." That stung. We always did Christmas together. Every year since we were kids. Even after Dad passed, even after she moved into the house, I made sure of it. She didn't invite me this year, sure, but I assumed that was just oversight. Families get busy, right? "I brought gifts," I said, holding up the bags in my hand. Thought I'd drop them off and say hi. She smiled again, this time wider, almost rehearsed. "That's sweet of you," she said, glancing toward the kitchen. Then, louder, to no one in particular. "This year's just for real family, though." The words hit me like a sucker punch. At first, I thought I misheard. Then I looked around the room. No one else reacted. No gasps. No awkward silences. Just chatter and laughter. I stood there, gifts in hand, like the kid picked last in gym class. Emma turned to walk away, and I started toward the door. My feet felt heavier with every step. I didn't want to make a scene. I just wanted to leave with my dignity intact. But then, just as I reached for the doorknob, I heard it, her voice, casual and mocking, just loud enough to cut through the noise. "He thinks paying the mortgage gets him a seat." Laughter followed. Not loud, but unmistakable. I froze. In that moment, I didn't feel like the dependable brother, or the nice one, or the fool with a credit score in the 800s. I felt invisible. Used. Stupid. I walked to my car in silence. Sat in the driver's seat for a few minutes, gripping the steering wheel like it might anchor me to something real. Then I popped the trunk, took out the gifts, and left them on the porch. No note. No name tags. Just a silent farewell to a role I didn't sign up for. By the time I got home, I wasn't angry. I was calm. And that scared me more. Because calm meant I had made a decision. A quiet, firm one. I opened my laptop. Pulled up the deed. The house was in my name, and the payments had been current because of me. Emma had no idea how the system worked. She never asked. Never cared. As far as she was concerned, that house was hers. Emotionally, maybe. Legally? Not even close. I called a lawyer. Told him what I wanted. He didn't even blink. "You're the legal owner?" he asked. "Yeah." "Okay. Let's transfer it." We started the paperwork that night. I didn't tell anyone, not even my best friend. I wanted it to be done before the first apology text came in, if one ever did. I had no idea how she'd react. Maybe she'd pretend it was a joke. Maybe she'd cry. Or maybe she'd go full soap opera and accuse me of betrayal. But one thing was certain, come morning, the house would no longer be hers. And she'd find out the second her key didn't work. The paperwork didn't take long. That's the funny thing about owning something on paper. You don't need anyone's permission to reclaim what's already yours. The lawyer drew up a notice of eviction with 30 days grace, just to keep things clean. I didn't want to throw the kids out into the snow, no matter how much their mother deserved it. But I wasn't going to keep burning my paycheck to play the villain in her holiday narrative either. Still, I knew she wouldn't take it well. Emma didn't handle boundaries. She liked being the center of gravity, pulling everyone into her orbit with emotional debt and half-truths. The moment you stepped back, you became the villain. I'd watched it happen to our cousin Darren when he refused to co-sign on her second car loan. She told the entire family he abandoned her during her lowest point, conveniently skipping the part where he'd already paid her insurance for 2 years straight. So, I waited. For 5 days, nothing happened. No calls. No texts. Not even a thank you message for the gifts I left on the porch. But I wasn't surprised. Emma only reached out when she needed something. And apparently, this Christmas, she didn't need me. Yet, on the 6th day, I got a text. Just one line. "Did something weird happen with the bank?" I didn't reply. I figured she was logging in to check the mortgage portal for the first time in months and finally noticed my name next to everything: payments, title, homeowner's insurance. I'd left the account open to her for years, but she never cared enough to look. I guess the wine and social media kept her busy. Then came the second text. "Mark? Why is there a new notice on the door?" I'd had the formal eviction posted that morning. 30 days. Plenty of time for her to figure out a plan. But I'd also taken one extra step, something subtle, something passive-aggressive in that petty older brother kind of way. I suspended the smart lock system. It was tied to my email, my credit card. All I had to do was freeze the subscription, and the keypad entry would revert to manual key access. She hadn't used a physical key in years. I knew that because I'd seen her brag on Facebook once about how she never carried keys like a peasant. That night, the calls started. First a few, then a dozen. By midnight, I had 47 missed calls and 3 voicemails, each more frantic than the last. The first was her pretending everything was fine. "Hey, so there's a weird thing on the door and I figured it's just a glitch or whatever. Call me when you get this." The second was sharper. "Seriously, Mark? If this is some kind of joke, it's not funny. The kids are freaked out." The third one, that one was quieter. More dangerous. "You're going to regret this." That was all she said. Just that one sentence. No yelling. No crying. Just the kind of quiet threat only family knows how to deliver, soft and cold, like a knife wrapped in velvet. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was scared. I wasn't. But because for the first time, I realized I was finally done. Not angry. Not heartbroken. Just done. The next morning, I went to work like nothing had happened. My phone buzzed nonstop. I didn't look. Around 10 a.m., I got a call from Mom. She never calls me. "Mark," she said, "what's going on with your sister?" I paused. "What do you mean?" "She says you're trying to kick her and the kids out." "Is this about Christmas?" I could hear the disappointment loaded in her tone, like I was the one who'd thrown a fit over holiday decorations and made things awkward. Not the one who'd been excluded from his own family gathering. Not the one who'd paid off 73 mortgage payments without a single thank you. I wanted to explain. I really did. But the second I opened my mouth, Mom cut in. "I mean, you have been acting kind of distant lately. And Emma told me you said something really cruel about the kids." I hung up, not angrily, just quietly. I stared at the wall for a long moment and let it all settle. This was what it always came down to. Emma had the tears. I had the receipts. And somehow, the tears always won. But not this time. That evening, Emma drove across town and showed up at my apartment. I saw her through the peephole, hair pulled back, jacket half-zipped, holding her phone like a lawyer holding evidence. She knocked once, twice. Then she yelled through the door. "You can't do this. You can't just evict me. This is my house. I live there. My kids go to school in that neighborhood. I didn't answer. Just turned up the TV and waited until her footsteps faded down the hallway. 3 days passed. Then she did what she always does when she's out of moves. She pulled in the rest of the family. Texts came in from my aunt, my cousin in Michigan, even my niece, who's 12 and doesn't know a mortgage from a mall pretzel. Hey, Uncle Mark. Mom says we're going to be homeless. Can we come stay with you? Emma was spinning her usual magic, weaponizing pity like a seasoned general. She told everyone I was mad about not getting invited to dinner and that I'd retaliated by stealing her house. She didn't mention the 5 years of free rent or the espresso machine I never got a thank you for. By the end of the week, she started going live on Facebook. I kid you not. Tears. Sobbing. Crocodile sniffles. Some people just don't value family, she said in one of them, dabbing her eyes while soft piano music played in the background. They forget who was there for them when they had no one. I nearly choked on my coffee when I saw it. Who was there for me? Lady, I was the one who paid the property taxes when you were in Cabo last spring. But I didn't comment. I didn't argue. I didn't even defend myself. Because the clock was ticking. She had 30 days. And every one of them was a countdown. On day 12, she left a voicemail pretending nothing had happened. Hey, just wanted to talk. You know? Maybe we both overreacted. The kids miss you. We all do. Let's have dinner or something. Just us. I didn't respond. On day 13, a mutual friend from high school messaged me with a screenshot of Emma's latest Facebook post. It was a grainy picture of her standing on the porch next to the eviction notice still taped to the door, with a caption that read, "Imagine thinking this makes you the bigger person." The comments section was split right down the middle, half sympathy, half suspicion. Some of the old crowd knew me well enough to side with caution. Didn't Mark buy that house? One guy commented. I remember when he posted about it a few years back. That thread disappeared within minutes. She was managing her image like a press secretary, deleting, curating, posting new things that made her look like a warrior mom fighting against evil bureaucracy. It was all carefully staged, all performative. One day, she posted a picture of her kids doing homework on the floor with the caption, "We're staying strong." Another day, she took a photo of her car parked in the driveway with a passive-aggressive tag. Some people forget where they come from. I watched it all like it was a bad reality show, and I already knew the finale. But what bothered me wasn't the lies. I'd come to expect those from Emma. What bothered me was how effortlessly people believed her. How easily you could rewrite the past if you just had enough crying selfies and vague quotes about betrayal. No one asked about the bank records. No one saw the receipts. No one cared about the years I kept the roof over her head while she found herself in yoga retreats and candle-making classes. It was around that time I started keeping a folder. Just for myself. Screenshots. Bank transfers. Texts. Photos. Emails. Not to expose her. Not yet. But because I needed proof for me. To remind myself that I wasn't crazy. That I didn't invent the last 5 years. That I wasn't the villain in the movie playing on her social media feed. Then came day 16. It was a Friday. I had just gotten home from work, threw off my shoes, and settled into the couch when my building's intercom buzzed. I ignored it. It buzzed again. Then a third time. I walked over and pressed the button. Yes, it's me, she said. Her voice was too calm. That made me nervous. I'm not doing this, Emma. Just open the door. I'm not doing this. She sighed. Okay, then I'll wait out here. Hope your neighbors don't mind. And she did. She stood in the lobby for almost an hour. I could see her through the security cam feed on my phone, arms crossed, pacing in short little loops like a caged animal, occasionally looking up, daring the camera to blink. She had that same look she used to give Mom when she was grounded as a teenager. That you will break before I do look. But I didn't. Eventually, she left. Later that night, I got a text. No words. Just a photo. It was the espresso machine I bought her. Smashed on the driveway. The next morning, I found out she had changed the Wi-Fi name in the house to Mark is a heartless troll and disconnected the Nest thermostat. She didn't have access to the app, of course, but I guess she figured out which breaker controlled the router and decided to make a statement. I didn't flinch. I let it ride. On day 21, she posted a video of her kids sitting on their front steps with backpacks on, looking confused and sad. Caption, "The countdown begins. Hashtag homeless by Christmas." The thing that killed me wasn't that she filmed it. It was that she made them pose. I could tell. The boy kept glancing at the camera, waiting for the cue to look solemn. The girl was biting her lip like she wanted to ask when they were allowed to smile again. It was a performance, one they didn't understand. And maybe that's what finally broke something in me. Not pity, resolve. I called my lawyer and asked what more I needed to do to make sure the transition went clean. He told me everything was filed. The final notice would be posted in 5 days. After that, she had a week to vacate. Can she stall it? I asked. Only if she files a formal dispute or tries to claim tenancy under some loophole. But given the fact that you own the property and she pays no rent or utilities, no, she doesn't have legal grounds. So I waited. And on day 27, I got the call from her new boyfriend. I didn't even know she was dating anyone. But suddenly, here he was, calling me at 11:37 p.m. She told me everything, he said, his voice heavy with self-righteousness. And honestly, man to man, you're acting like a real piece of work. I almost laughed. Man to man. She's your sister, dude. Those kids look up to you. And you're really gonna make them move right before the holidays? I paused. I gave her 5 years, I said. You've known her 5 weeks. There was silence on the other end. Then, you'll regret this. Same threat. Different voice. The next day, the police were called. But not by me. Emma had filed a wellness check on me, claiming she was worried about my mental health and that I'd been making erratic decisions. I let the officers in, showed them the eviction paperwork, the mortgage records, the messages. They left apologetically. She said you'd been threatening her, one officer said, clearly uncomfortable. I showed him the texts, the voicemail, the smashed espresso machine. He nodded and left. By now, I was used to the pattern. Lie, deflect, escalate. What she didn't realize was that I was done playing defense. In 3 days, the final notice would go up. And in 5, she'd be out. It was a Tuesday morning, day 30. Overcast sky. Light rain. I stood in the parking lot across the street from the house I'd paid for and watched the process unfold through the windshield of my car, heat on low, coffee in hand. I wasn't hiding. I just didn't want her to see me and start performing again. Emma was a spotlight addict. Even in crisis, she needed an audience. The sheriff's deputy was professional, calm, and, thankfully, not interested in drama. He knocked twice, waited, then called it in. Subject is present, I heard faintly through the cracked window. Serving final notice. Emma answered the door in her pink robe and thick eyeliner like it was any other day. I saw her freeze. Say something with her hands waving in that dramatic way of hers. Then, like clockwork, the boyfriend stepped out from behind her, still shirtless. They tried to stall, tried to reason, tried to twist the narrative one last time. But the law doesn't run on emotions. It runs on paper. And all the paper said the same thing. The house wasn't hers. Never was. The deputy gave her 48 hours to vacate. 2 days. No more extensions. No more calls to mom. No more, I didn't know, or he promised me. Just 2 days to gather her things and leave. I didn't go over. I didn't wave. I just finished my coffee and drove off. That night, my phone didn't buzz once. No threats. No apologies. Just silence. The next afternoon, I got a message from a mutual cousin, Melissa, who'd always been the Switzerland of the family. Hey, just wanted to say, I know what you did was hard, but you were right. I'm sorry for not saying something sooner. I stared at that message longer than I expected. Not because it changed anything, but because it was the first time, the very first time, someone acknowledged that maybe I wasn't the villain in this story. Then came the hard part, actually taking back the house. The eviction window ended on Thursday morning. I took the day off work, called the locksmith, and met him in the driveway at 10 a.m. Emma and her boyfriend were already gone. No confrontation. No tears. Just a dent in the garage door, cigarette butts on the porch, and a recycling bin overflowing with wine bottles and frozen pizza boxes. Inside? Chaos. The house was trashed. Furniture overturned. Wall scuffed. The kids' rooms looked like they'd been evacuated in a rush, drawers pulled out, clothes still hanging halfway from hangers. She took the appliances I bought, left behind broken ones. The espresso machine, of course, was long gone. I half expected a hole in the wall where the TV used to be, but no, she left that. Probably because it was mine, or because it was bolted down and she didn't want to deal with the hassle. But the worst part? The note, taped to the fridge, written in marker on a crumpled paper plate. Congrats. Hope it was worth it. No signature. No heart. Just spite, etched in sharpa like a parting curse. I didn't touch it. Not at first. I just stood there in the kitchen, surrounded by dust and stained countertops, and tried to remember what the place looked like when I bought it. Before the screaming matches, before the manipulation, before I became a villain for setting a boundary. It took me a few weeks to clean it up. I paid for repairs, replaced what was broken, and threw out anything that smelled like resentment, which, as it turns out, was most of the furniture. A neighbor dropped by while I was scrubbing the baseboards and said, "Glad to see someone finally taking care of the place again." I smiled. "Yeah," I said. "Me too." I didn't move in right away. I wasn't sure if I wanted to. The house felt heavy, like it still echoed with old arguments and unspoken debts. But it was mine, really mine, and something about that mattered more than I expected. Mom didn't speak to me for 3 weeks. Then, like nothing happened, she sent me a message about a family barbecue. No apology, no explanation, just a casual, "Are you bringing your famous potato salad?" I replied, "Not this year." She left me on read. Emma, for her part, went quiet, deleted her Facebook for a bit, then came back with a new profile full of inspirational quotes about growth and cutting out toxic people. I didn't follow her. I didn't care to. But I heard from Melissa that she moved in with her boyfriend, then his mom, then a new place across town. Rumor was she was trying to start a parenting blog. You'd think she'd have changed after all that. Learned something. Reflected. But the truth is, some people don't grow. They just get better at playing the same role. A few months later, I got a letter from the county. It was the new property tax bill cut in half. Apparently, her boyfriend had filed some paperwork claiming tenancy during their time there, but it got denied. And because Emma never paid a cent in 5 years, the revised value came back lower than expected. Silver linings, I guess. Eventually, I did move in, painted the walls, replaced the carpet, ripped out the old curtains she'd left behind, still dusty with perfume and maybe a bit of desperation. It took time, more than I thought. But slowly, the house stopped feeling like hers. It started to feel like peace, like a reset. One day, I found the old box of holiday decorations she left behind. Most of it was broken or tangled, but at the bottom, beneath the garland and cracked ornaments, was a tiny plastic angel. Cheap, dollar store kind. She'd used it every year since the kids were toddlers. I held it for a while, turning it over in my hand, remembering all the times I'd been the one to unpack it, place it carefully on the tree, smile through gritted teeth as she made snide comments about my boring life. Then I stood up, walked outside, and tossed it in the trash. I didn't need souvenirs from people who only remembered me when they needed something. And that Christmas, I hosted. Not a big gathering, just a few close friends. People who'd stuck around through the mess. We cooked, laughed, watched old movies. And when it came time to decorate the tree, I placed a brand new star on top. One I picked out for myself. No ghosts, no guilt, just light. And for the first time in years, it actually felt like home. I'm 34 years old, and I thought I had life figured out, stable job, a modest home, and a wife I believed I could trust. My name's Evan, and if you told me a year ago that I'd one day find my elderly parents shivering outside my own house while my in-laws danced and drank inside like they owned the place, I would have laughed. But when that night came, I didn't laugh. I froze. Because in that moment, everything I thought I knew about love, respect, and family shattered. I grew up in a small town, raised by two of the kindest people you could ever meet. My dad, Harold, worked as a mechanic for nearly 40 years, and my mom, Linda, ran a little bakery that barely made enough to keep the lights on, but she still managed to bring cupcakes to every school fundraiser. We weren't rich, but we had love, the kind of home where dinner was always hot, arguments ended in hugs, and birthdays were sacred. My parents sacrificed everything to give me a better life. They worked extra shifts to put me through college, skipped vacations so I could pay rent during internships, and when I finally landed my engineering job, they were there in the front row at my graduation, crying like I'd just won the lottery. Years later, I met Rachel. She was charming, confident, and came from a much wealthier family, the kind of people who had summer homes and talked about wine pairings like it was a competition. When we first started dating, she seemed down to earth despite her background. She loved that I was grounded, and I loved that she didn't seem to care that I wasn't rich. My parents adored her at first too. My mom even baked her a pie the first time they met, and my dad called her kiddo like she was already part of the family. Things started changing after we got married. At first, it was subtle. Rachel insisting we host Christmas at our place because it's more modern than my parents' small home, or suggesting I dress a little better when meeting her parents. I brushed it off as harmless. But over time, those small comments grew sharper. My parents suddenly became a little too old-fashioned, a bit clingy, or not exactly socially polished. Her tone carried a hint of embarrassment, like she wished she could trade my family in for a shinier one. Her parents, especially her mother, Susan, didn't hide their disapproval. From day one, they looked at my family like we were a charity case. I'll never forget our first joint dinner. My dad cracked one of his classic corny jokes about carburetors, and Susan smiled thinly before asking, "So, Harold, are you still doing cars?" Like it was some kind of childish hobby. My mom tried to laugh it off, but I saw the way her hands trembled under the table. I tried to keep the peace. I told myself, they just come from a different world, and kept hoping Rachel would defend my parents. Instead, she'd say things like, "You know how mom is, don't take it personally." But every time she said that, I did take it personally, because it was my family they were belittling. Fast forward 5 years. My parents started struggling with their health. My dad's back problems worsened, and my mom's arthritis made it hard for her to run the bakery anymore. They sold it to a young couple, downsized their home, and told me they'd like to move closer. "Not to bother you, honey," Mom said, "just so we can be near." I wanted them nearby, so I helped them find a small apartment just 10 minutes from us. Rachel wasn't thrilled, but she pretended to be supportive. "That's sweet," she said, "as long as they respect boundaries." I didn't like that word, boundaries. My parents were never intrusive. They never showed up unannounced or asked for anything. They just wanted family dinners once in a while, a phone call every few days. Then came my in-laws' idea, a grand anniversary party at our house. Apparently, our backyard and open layout made it the perfect venue. I was hesitant, but Rachel insisted. "It's just one night," she said. "My parents will handle everything." They did more than that. They took over completely. They hired decorators, caterers, and even a valet service. For days, my house felt like a rental property. Every time I walked in, someone was rearranging furniture or hauling boxes of champagne. I overheard Susan telling one of the planners, "We'll need to move those old family photos. They don't exactly fit the aesthetic." I wanted to snap, but Rachel just squeezed my arm and whispered, "Please don't start." So I didn't. I told myself I could handle one night of pretending. The night of the party, my parents called me around 6 p.m. "We're outside." "Honey," Mom said, "do we come around the back?" I frowned. Guests were supposed to use the front. I walked out to greet them, but before I reached the driveway, one of the valets stopped them. He was holding a clipboard and looking confused. "I'm sorry, ma'am, sir. This is a private event." Before I could step in, Susan appeared, wearing her usual fake smile. "Oh, they must be mistaken," she said. "The staff entrance is around back." Staff. She thought my parents were staff. My mom, in her floral dress, holding a small gift bag. My dad, leaning slightly on his cane, smiling even as confusion filled his eyes. I froze. Rachel ran up a few seconds later, her face pale. "Mom," she hissed, "they're his parents." "Oh." Susan laughed lightly, covering her mouth. Goodness, I didn't recognize them in the dark. But she didn't apologize. She just waved her hand and turned away, already back in hostess mode. My parents didn't say much, but I saw how my mom's smile faltered, how my dad's jaw tightened. I ushered them inside. But the moment we crossed the threshold, it was like stepping into another world. Chandeliers, catering tables, people in designer suits. It didn't feel like my house anymore. Every photo of me and my parents had been replaced by Rachel's family portraits. Even the magnets on the fridge were gone. The whole night, my parents sat quietly at a corner table while Susan and her friends toasted to family and success. No one spoke to them except the servers. I tried to sit with them, but Rachel kept pulling me away. "Come say hi to Aunt Denise. Evan, help with the champagne." Every time I looked back, my parents looked smaller, out of place, like guests at a stranger's home. When the night finally ended, I helped them to their car. My dad smiled weakly. "Don't worry, son," he said. "We're just proud of you." I wanted to believe him. I thought that would be the worst of it. I was wrong. A few months later, I got a promotion at work, higher pay, more responsibility, and long hours. I started getting home late, sometimes after midnight. That's when Rachel's parents began helping out. It started small, Susan dropping by to check on the house, her husband supervising a contractor I'd hired, even borrowing our car for errands. I didn't realize how bad it had gotten until one Friday evening when I came home early and found Susan giving a tour of my house to her friends. "Oh, and this is the master suite," she said proudly. "We helped them design this space. Such a cozy retreat." Helped them? I confronted Rachel after everyone left, and she brushed it off again. "They're just excited," she said. "Don't make it a big deal." But the truth was, they had slowly made themselves at home, in my home. I'd find Susan's perfume bottles in the bathroom, her husband's cigar case on the counter, and their mail addressed to my address. I tried to set boundaries, but Rachel said I was overreacting. Then came the night that changed everything. It was late October, freezing and windy. I'd been at work till 10 p.m. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw cars lined up along the street, lights flashing from inside the house, music thumping. Another party. My in-laws were throwing a full-blown event in my home, without even telling me. But that wasn't the worst part. As I stepped out of the car, I noticed two figures sitting on the front steps, bundled in coats, shivering. My heart stopped. It was my parents. My mom's eyes were red from crying. My dad's hands were trembling. "Dad," I rushed over. "What are you doing out here?" He looked up slowly, his voice soft and cracked. "Son, why won't they let us in?" That single question cut deeper than anything I'd ever felt. I turned toward the house, where laughter spilled out through the windows, and something inside me snapped. I didn't say a word. I just stood there, watching the warm light flicker across the glass, knowing that everything that would happen next would change all of our lives forever. My father's question kept echoing in my head. Why won't they let us in? I couldn't answer. My throat felt tight, my hands shaking as I helped my parents to their feet. My mother tried to smile, clutching the little box she'd brought. I noticed then that it was the same one she used for her homemade cookies. They must have thought there was another gathering, maybe a family dinner or something I hadn't told them about. I didn't know whether to feel more angry or ashamed. Inside, the music was loud enough to rattle the windows. I could hear laughter, clinking glasses, someone shouting about shots. It wasn't the quiet kind of celebration either. It was the expensive kind. The kind that came with catering staff, champagne towers, and people too drunk to notice anything beyond themselves. I walked up to the door and rang the bell. Nothing. I tried again, harder. Finally, a young man, one of the caterers, opened it halfway, squinting. "Sorry, sir. Guests are supposed to enter through the back." "I live here," I said flatly. He blinked. Oh, I didn't know," Mrs. Cooper said. I didn't wait for him to finish. I pushed the door open, guiding my parents inside. The warmth hit them immediately, but it didn't seem to reach their faces. They looked lost. My mom whispered, "We didn't mean to interrupt anything, honey. We just thought we'd stop by since you said Fridays were usually free." I stared at her, realizing she had probably called ahead, and Rachel had ignored her. As soon as we stepped into the living room, I froze. Susan was standing near the fireplace, drink in hand, wearing a silk dress and pearls. Rachel was beside her, laughing with a group of people from her parents' country club. They looked like the perfect image of wealth and comfort, until Rachel noticed me. Her smile faltered for half a second, then snapped back on like a light switch. "Evan, you're home early," she said, a little too loudly. I glanced around. My living room was unrecognizable again. White tablecloths draped over my furniture, decorations strung across the ceiling, framed photos of her parents on the mantelpiece. There wasn't a trace of me or my family anywhere. "What's going on?" I asked, keeping my voice low. Susan turned toward me, all faux charm. "Oh, we're just hosting a little gathering for the charity board. I assumed Rachel told you." She didn't. "Oh, well, you've been so busy lately, dear. I didn't want to bother you with details." Behind me, my mom was looking around quietly, like she was trying not to be in the way. My dad gave a polite nod to Susan and her husband, even though his jaw was tight. Susan noticed them then. "Oh, Harold and Linda. I didn't realize you were coming." Her tone carried that same rehearsed sweetness that only made things worse. "We don't exactly have extra seating tonight, but perhaps you could take a spot at the kitchen island?" My mom nodded quickly. "Oh no, we don't want to intrude. We just..." "Perfect," Susan interrupted. "The staff will bring over some appetizers." She turned back to her friends before my mom could even finish her sentence. I clenched my fists. "They're my parents, Susan. Not guests you can seat wherever you like." Rachel shot me a warning look, her smile still frozen for the audience. Evan, she whispered through her teeth, please don't start. We can talk later. I wanted to scream, but my parents, ever patient, tried to smooth it over. My dad placed a hand on my shoulder and said softly, it's fine, son. We'll just stay for a little bit. They sat on 2 stools near the kitchen counter while waiters walked around serving champagne. No one approached them. No one even looked their way. It was like they didn't exist. The rest of the night passed in a blur of humiliation. Every few minutes, I'd catch Susan glancing at my parents with a mix of pity and annoyance, as if they were out of place in her curated scene. My mother kept smiling through it, but I could tell she was fighting tears. My father barely spoke at all. Then, midway through the evening, I overheard Susan talking to one of her friends, a woman with a diamond bracelet the size of a small planet. Rachel has done so well for herself, Susan said, clearly proud. Especially marrying Evan. I mean, considering where he comes from. The friend leaned closer. Oh, what do you mean? Susan lowered her voice, but not enough. His parents are sweet, of course, but, well, they're not exactly our circle. It's been an adjustment. That was it. I walked straight over. An adjustment? I said. Susan blinked. Oh, Evan, I didn't see you there. I was just saying how proud we are of you both. I stared at her, then at Rachel. My wife looked mortified but didn't say a word. Her silence hurt more than Susan's words. That night, after the guests finally left, I asked Rachel point blank, do you even like my parents? She hesitated too long. Evan, it's not about like or dislike. It's about compatibility. They're very simple people. My parents just have a different way of living. That's all. Simple. I repeated, my voice breaking on the word. They're kind. They're generous. They're the reason I have any of this. Rachel sighed, rubbing her temples. You always make me the villain. You know how hard it is trying to balance both families? My parents just want to help, but you keep taking it as an attack. Because it is one, I said. She turned away. You're overreacting. Just let it go. But I couldn't. And things only got worse from there. Over the next few weeks, Susan started dropping by more often. Always unannounced. Always with a reason. Just checking on the houseplants, or making sure the cleaning crew came on time. I'd find her rearranging furniture or swapping out decor. Once, I walked in to see her directing movers, who were installing a massive dining table she'd ordered for hosting purposes. My old wooden table, the one my parents had given us when we first married, was gone. When I asked Rachel where it went, she said, Mom had it donated. It didn't really match the style anymore. It felt like a punch to the gut. That table had scratches from my childhood, carvings from the day my dad and I tried to fix it with a screwdriver. Gone. My parents, meanwhile, kept getting more distant. My mom would call, saying she didn't want to be a bother. My dad, who used to visit to help me fix things around the house, stopped coming by entirely. Every time they did visit, Susan would find a way to make them uncomfortable, subtle digs, backhanded compliments, constant mentions of proper etiquette. The final straw came when Rachel's parents decided to host Thanksgiving, again, at my house. I found out 2 days before the event when Susan called to confirm the caterer. You'll love it, she said cheerfully. We're going for a more refined atmosphere this year. No store-bought pies. My mom was planning to bake, I said. Oh, Susan replied, her tone dripping with condescension. Well, she's welcome to bring something if she insists. I hung up before I said something I'd regret. When Thanksgiving came, my parents arrived right on time, carrying homemade dishes, smiling despite everything. But Susan had changed the entire seating arrangement. The family table was set for her relatives and friends. My parents were seated at the small table near the back, like extras in their own son's life. At one point, I noticed my mom's pumpkin pie, the one she was so proud of, sitting untouched on the counter while everyone raved about Susan's caterer's desserts. My dad quietly got up and helped clean dishes halfway through dinner, even though he was technically a guest. That night, after everyone left, I sat on the back porch with my parents. My mom patted my hand and said softly, It's okay, honey. We're just happy to see you. But I could see the sadness in her eyes. My dad finally said what they both were thinking. You've worked hard for everything you have, Evan. Don't let anyone make you feel small in your own home. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, realizing I'd let my parents, the people who'd given me everything, be humiliated over and over again. all because I kept choosing silence over confrontation. But then came that cold October night again, the one that would change everything. Because seeing my parents outside my home, shivering while strangers drank inside, wasn't just an accident. It was the final proof that this wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. It was deliberate, and I was finally done staying quiet. The next morning after that humiliating night, my parents didn't call. They always did, even if it was just to say, "Drive safe to work," or "Your dad made extra muffins if you want some." That silence, it hit different. It wasn't just quiet, it was heavy. I tried to tell myself they were just tired, but the truth sank in. They'd reached their limit. When I called, my mom's voice was soft, but there was a stiffness I hadn't heard before. "We didn't mean to cause any trouble last night, honey," she said. "Your wife looked busy, and your in-laws, well, they seem to have their hands full with the house." The house. The way she said it made my stomach twist. My parents didn't even call it my house anymore. I told her they could come by any time, that they never needed an invitation, but she just said, maybe after things settled down. That was the first real fracture between us. I didn't realize it then, but my silence that night had cost me more than pride. It had cost me their trust. Rachel acted like nothing happened. She breezed through breakfast humming, dressed for brunch with her mom, and asked casually if I could pick up a new set of dining chairs her mother ordered for us. I didn't respond. I just watched her, wondering how someone could seem so unbothered after what I'd seen. When she finally noticed my silence, she sighed. "Evan, please don't start again." "Again?" I asked, keeping my tone calm. "You think what happened last night is normal?" She rolled her eyes. "My parents didn't mean to leave them outside. It was a misunderstanding. They were freezing, Rachel." "I know, and that's awful, but you're acting like they did it on purpose." I leaned forward. "Did you even invite them?" Her eyes flicked away for a split second. That's all it took. "I knew." "You didn't," I said quietly. "Evan, you knew they were coming. My mom calls you every week. You ignored her." She crossed her arms. "Because your parents have no sense of boundaries. They just show up." My mother was planning a formal event, not some casual family dinner. It would have been embarrassing. I just stared at her. "Embarrassing?" Her expression hardened. "You always twist my words. I'm saying they don't fit in at events like that, and it's not fair to them to feel out of place." "Out of place?" I repeated slowly. "They're my family, Rachel." "Exactly," she said. "Yours. And my parents are mine. Maybe we need to start setting clearer lines before things get worse." That word again, lines. It was always her way of saying, keep your family away. That day, something shifted between us. We spoke less, moved differently. The house didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a stage where I was the unwanted guest. Over the next few weeks, my parents stopped coming entirely. My mom's calls became shorter, and my dad avoided talking about the house altogether. But the part that really burned came from a neighbor, Mrs. Wells, who lived 2 doors down. She caught me outside one morning and said, "Your parents stopped by the other day, dear. Such nice people. But your mother looked a little upset." "Upset?" I asked, uneasy. "She mentioned something about not wanting to cause tension between you and your wife. Said she'd dropped off a few things for you, some old keepsakes." My heart sank. I hadn't seen anything. When I got home, I went straight to the garage. Nothing. Then I checked the basement. Empty. When Rachel came home, I asked, "Did my parents leave something here recently?" She froze mid-step. "What kind of something?" "Old boxes, photo albums, my dad's tools, some keepsakes." Her tone shifted immediately. "Oh, those. Yes, your mom brought a few boxes, but they were falling apart, Evan. Half of it was moldy junk. I told my mom's cleaning service to toss it." I couldn't breathe for a moment. "You what?" "They were old, baby. You don't need that clutter." I walked past her to the garage, checking every corner. Trash bins empty. Everything gone. "Rachel," I said, my voice shaking. "That wasn't clutter. That was my family's history." She sighed impatiently. "You're exaggerating. What did you even need from there?" "Broken tools and yellowed photos." "Photos of my grandfather," I snapped. "My mom's letters. My dad's medals. I stopped, running my hand through my hair, trying not to lose it. "You had no right." "Don't talk to me like that," she said coldly. "It's our home, and I get a say in what stays here." I stared at her, realizing the truth. She didn't see us as partners. She saw everything, me, the house, even my parents, as things she could control. That night, I drove to my parents' apartment. My mom answered the door with a tired smile that didn't reach her eyes. My dad was sitting in his recliner, a TV dinner untouched in front of him. When I told them what happened, my mom's lips trembled. She tried to hide it, but tears slipped out anyway. "It's okay," she whispered. "We shouldn't have left those things with her. It's our fault." "It's not your fault," I said. "It's mine. I should have seen this sooner." My dad finally spoke, his voice low. "Son, you don't owe anyone your silence." Those words stuck with me. When I got home later that night, Rachel was sitting at the kitchen counter, scrolling through her phone. I didn't say a word. I just walked past her. The next few days were tense. She acted like nothing was wrong, but I noticed the small things: call she'd silence when I entered the room, text notifications from her mother that popped up constantly. I started feeling like a stranger in my own house. Then one afternoon, I came home early. There were voices in the living room, Susan and Rachel, mid-conversation. I was about to step in when I heard my name. Susan said, "You've done well managing him so far. You just have to make sure everything stays under your name when the refinance goes through." Rachel replied, "Mom, I told you he'll sign it. He doesn't even look at the paperwork." My blood ran cold. I stepped forward. "What refinance?" They both froze. Susan tried to recover. "Oh, Evan, we were just discussing some." "What refinance?" I repeated. Rachel's face went pale. "It's nothing, just the home equity paperwork. We talked about upgrading the backyard, remember?" "No, we didn't," I said sharply. "And that's not what you just said." Susan gave her daughter a sharp look, then forced a smile. "It's just a standard financial adjustment. Nothing to worry about, dear." I walked over and picked up the papers sitting on the counter. My name was there, alongside hers. And beneath it, a second signature line for a joint refinance application listing both Rachel and Susan Cooper as co-owners. My vision blurred. "You put your mother on the mortgage?" Rachel tried to speak, but Susan jumped in. "Evan, this is common practice in families with shared investments. We've contributed a great deal to this property, after all." "Contributed?" I repeated. "You mean taking over everything I built?" Rachel's voice broke. "Evan, please, don't make this dramatic. It's just paperwork. Paperwork that removes me from my own house." That silence that followed was unbearable. Rachel's eyes darted between me and her mother, panic rising. Susan, on the other hand, didn't flinch. She just took a sip of her wine, watching me like I was some child throwing a tantrum. "Evan," she said calmly, "you really should be grateful. We're ensuring this house stays financially stable. You wouldn't want it falling apart, would you?" I took a deep breath. "Get out." Susan blinked. "Excuse me." I said, "Get out of my house." Rachel stepped forward. "Evan." "Now," I said louder this time. Susan scoffed. "You're being ridiculous. You can't just." But I didn't hear the rest. I walked to the door, opened it, and pointed outside. "Leave." She stared at me for a moment, then turned to Rachel. "You see what I mean? This is what happens when you marry beneath you." Rachel didn't follow her out. She just stood there, frozen, torn between me and the woman who'd raised her. That night, she packed a small bag and left to stay with her parents for a few days. I didn't stop her. I needed silence more than I needed answers. But what I didn't know was that while I was at work the next day, she came back with her parents and emptied half the house. Furniture, decor, electronics, even the framed photos that I had taken. When I walked in, it was like someone had hollowed my life out. There was a note on the counter. "I'm sorry you can't see what's best for us. I'll come back when you've calmed down." I sank into the one remaining chair in the living room, surrounded by emptiness, and for the first time in my life, I felt something inside me shift from heartbreak to clarity. Because that's when I realized something my father once told me. Some people don't want a partner, they want a property. And I was done being owned. The first few days after Rachel left were eerily quiet. I'd walk into a room and feel the emptiness like it had weight. The house echoed. Every step sounded too loud. Every clock ticked too slowly. I'd reach for things that weren't there anymore. The remote, the photo of my parents on my desk, the small ceramic owl my mom had made me in college that used to sit by the TV. Gone. She'd taken even the smallest traces of my family, as if erasing them would make the house hers completely. I tried not to think about it, but every time I turned on the lights and saw bare walls, I couldn't help but imagine Rachel's face when she left. Calm, detached, maybe even proud. She'd walked out like someone who'd just crossed something off her to-do list. For the first time in years, I didn't have anyone telling me what I should say, how I should act, or when my parents were too much. But it didn't feel like freedom yet. It felt like standing in the wreckage of a life I didn't recognize. That week, I threw myself into work. I'd stay late, volunteer for projects, anything to avoid going home. But it caught up to me. One night, around 11 p.m., I sat at my desk and realized I hadn't eaten all day. My hands were shaking. My reflection in the office window looked older somehow, like I'd aged 10 years in a week. When I finally drove home, there was an envelope taped to my front door. My stomach sank before I even opened it. It was a notice, a request for verification of property ownership. My name was still listed, but it mentioned secondary interest held by Susan Cooper. My chest went cold. She'd actually gone through with it. I called my bank the next morning, trying to stay calm. The woman on the line said, "It appears there was an attempt to modify the mortgage, but it was flagged because of mismatched authorization." Attempt? I asked. "Yes, Mr. Hill," she said. "Someone submitted paperwork with your digital signature, but it didn't pass verification. We've frozen any changes pending your confirmation." That word, frozen, might have been the only thing keeping me together that day. I asked who filed it, but she couldn't disclose details beyond a co-applicant. I didn't need her to say it. I already knew. Rachel. That night, I sat in the middle of the empty living room and stared at the walls, thinking about how my life had gone from quiet family dinners to forged documents and fake smiles. Somewhere in between being a husband and a son, I'd lost myself completely. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my dad. "Heard you've had a rough week. Mom made soup. Come by tomorrow." I hadn't told them everything yet. I didn't know how. I'd already let them down once. But the next day, I went anyway. Their apartment was small, just 2 bedrooms and a tiny balcony that overlooked the parking lot, but it felt warmer than my house ever did. My mom opened the door before I could knock twice. She smiled when she saw me, but I could tell she knew. Moms always do. She didn't ask questions right away. She just handed me a bowl of soup and said, "Eat first." My dad sat across from me, watching quietly. After a few minutes, he finally said, "You don't look like you've been sleeping." "I haven't," I admitted. "They tried to take the house." He didn't react right away. He just nodded slowly, like he'd been expecting it. "People like them don't stop until they own everything they touch," he said. "But they don't know what it's like to earn what they have. That's their weakness." Mom reached across the table and took my hand. "You don't have to fight them, honey. You just have to outlast them." I wanted to believe that. But the more I thought about what Rachel and her parents had done, the lies, the humiliation, the way they'd used me, the more something dark and steady began to form inside me. Not rage, exactly. More like clarity. When I left their apartment that night, my dad followed me to the parking lot. Before I got into the car, he said, "Evan, do you remember what I told you when you got your first job?" I smiled faintly. "You said never let anyone make me feel like I owe them my success." He nodded. "Good. Now it's time to remember that." That was the first night I started thinking differently. I didn't rush to fix things. I didn't call Rachel or send angry messages. Instead, I started paying attention. I went through every email, every document I'd ever signed. I realized how many times I'd let her handle the details. She'd changed utilities, updated insurance, even listed her mother's contact on my homeowner's policy for emergencies. It wasn't just disrespect anymore. It was a pattern. I called a lawyer, an old friend from college named Marcus. He wasn't a divorce attorney by trade. He specialized in real estate, but he agreed to take a look at the paperwork. After an hour of reviewing, he looked up and said, "Evan, this isn't just a refinance attempt. They've been setting this up for months." He showed me small details I'd missed: requests for joint access to financial records, power of attorney forms disguised as co-signing permissions, and an email thread between Rachel and the mortgage agent about transferring liability to simplify future estate management. In plain English, it meant they were trying to make me a guest in my own life. Marcus leaned back in his chair. "The good news is, nothing's finalized. The bad news is, they've already leveraged your home equity as part of another investment proposal under her parents' LLC." I blinked. "They used my house as collateral?" He nodded. "It's not binding yet, but it's close." That was the moment everything inside me went still. No more confusion. No more trying to make sense of it. Just a simple, cold realization. They weren't just manipulative. They were thieves. That night, I couldn't sleep again, but for a different reason. My mind was racing, not with pain this time, but with purpose. I started gathering everything: bank statements, messages, legal documents. I backed up files, printed records, and moved valuables from the house into a storage unit under my name only. It felt strange, like preparing for a storm I'd known was coming for years but never faced. A few days later, Rachel texted, "Can we talk? I think we both need to calm down." I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. "Sure, come by tomorrow." She showed up right on time, dressed perfectly as always, her perfume filling the air before she even stepped inside. She looked around, frowning slightly at the empty spaces. "It feels different in here," she said. "It is," I replied. We sat in silence for a minute. Then she started with the same tone she always used when she wanted to sound reasonable. "I know things have been tense. My parents were just trying to help. They didn't mean to overstep." "Help?" I asked, calm but firm. "Rachel, they tried to put your mother on my mortgage." She sighed. "You're exaggerating again. It was just about simplifying ownership." "Ownership of what?" "My life." Her jaw tightened. "You always twist everything I say." "This is exactly why my parents think." "Think what?" I cut in. "That I'm not good enough for you? That I should be grateful they let me exist in my own home." She went quiet. I think part of her expected me to yell or plead like before. But I didn't. I just looked at her, really looked at her, and saw someone I didn't even recognize anymore. After a long silence, she stood. "I'll stay at my parents' for a while. We both need space." "For once," I said quietly, "I agree." When she left, I locked the door behind her and stood there for a long time. It didn't feel like the end of a marriage. It felt like walking out of a cage I hadn't realized I was in. The next few weeks were hard. I wasn't used to living alone. I'd wake up expecting to hear her footsteps, then remember she wasn't there. I'd reach for my phone to text her about something small, only to stop halfway. But every time I missed her, I reminded myself of that image. My parents outside, shivering while she laughed inside. It was like a compass keeping me pointed in the right direction. I started spending more time with my parents again. I helped my mom bake for the holidays, fixed a leaky pipe in their kitchen, took my dad to his doctor appointments. It was simple, quiet, real. And slowly, that numbness started to fade. But I wasn't done yet. Because while Rachel and her parents thought they'd taken control of everything, I was quietly taking it back, one document, one signature, one calculated move at a time. And when the time came to show them exactly what I'd learned from watching their games, they'd never see it coming. The weeks that followed felt like breathing fresh air after years of inhaling smoke. The silence that used to feel suffocating became comforting. I started hearing things again. Birds in the morning, rain against the windows, the sound of my own footsteps on the hardwood floors. I didn't realize how much noise Rachel's family brought into my life until it was gone. Every room used to echo with their constant judgment, the subtle sighs, the fake compliments, the whispered comments when my parents visited. Now it was just quiet, peaceful. I decided to take back control, but not the way I used to, through arguments or trying to prove myself. That never worked. This time, I focused on rebuilding, silently, methodically, and fully on my own terms. First, I called Marcus, my lawyer friend. "I want to lock down everything under my name. No joint access, no open authorizations," I told him. He helped me close joint accounts, cancel co-signed cards, and transfer all property titles into verified protection under a trust that only I could access. We spent hours digging through every document, every clause Rachel's parents had inserted. By the time we were done, there wasn't a single loose thread left for them to pull. Marcus smirked when he finished reviewing the last file. "You're bulletproof now," he said. "They can't touch a cent without committing fraud." "Good," I said quietly. "Then let's make sure if they try, they regret it." At work, things started turning around too. I'd been so distracted during the chaos that I hadn't noticed how much I'd neglected my projects. But once the noise was gone, I threw myself into them again. My company was launching a major infrastructure upgrade, and I volunteered to lead the design team. It was a challenge, endless nights, tight deadlines, but it gave me something I hadn't felt in months: purpose. My boss noticed. 3 weeks later, he called me into his office. "Evan," he said, "you've been killing it lately. We've got an opening for a senior engineering lead position. I want you to take it." I blinked. I hesitated. "That's a big jump." He smiled. So make the jump. That promotion changed everything. The raise was significant, but it wasn't about the money, it was the validation. After being constantly undermined, I finally felt capable again. Like the version of myself I used to be before marriage. The one who dreamed big and believed in earning every inch of progress. I didn't tell Rachel. I didn't post about it. I just worked quietly, let the results speak. My parents, though, noticed right away. When I told them the news, my mom teared up. "I knew you'd find your way, sweetheart," she said. My dad smiled. That slow, proud kind of smile that says everything without words. "See," he said, "you build things. That's what you do. You don't need anyone's permission." I started spending more time with them again. Saturday breakfasts at their apartment became routine, pancakes, coffee, and quiet laughter. My dad's health was improving, too. I started helping him get back into small mechanical projects, the kind that made him light up. One weekend, we rebuilt an old lawnmower engine just for fun. Mom filmed us with her phone, giggling every time we argued over which wrench was the right size. Those moments reminded me what real family looked like. Then, almost 2 months after Rachel left, I got an email from her. The subject line was short: "We need to talk." I stared at it for a long time before opening it. I've been thinking a lot about us. I know things got out of hand. My parents were only trying to protect me, and I didn't realize how much that hurt you. "Can we meet for dinner, just to talk? I miss you." I didn't reply right away. I forwarded the message to Marcus. He called 5 minutes later. "Be careful," he said. "This smells like a setup. If they couldn't get your property, they might be trying to play sympathy next." He was right. Still, I agreed to meet. Not because I wanted her back, but because I needed to see her face when she realized I wasn't the same man she left behind. We met at a quiet restaurant downtown. She arrived late, of course, in a designer coat and heels that probably cost more than my car payment. When she saw me, she smiled like nothing had ever happened. "You look good," she said, sitting down. "Work must be going well." "It is," I replied evenly. She played with her wine glass. "I've been thinking, maybe we just need a reset. I know my parents went too far. They were trying to protect me, but I told them I need to make my own choices." "Is that what this is?" I asked. "Your choice." Her smile faltered. "I still love you, Evan, and I don't want to throw everything away over misunderstandings." I leaned back. "A misunderstanding is forgetting a dinner reservation, Rachel, not trying to steal someone's house." She looked away, biting her lip. "It wasn't like that." I didn't argue. Instead, I slid a folder across the table. Copies of the refinance papers, the forged signatures, and the LLC proposal linking her parents to the property. Her face drained of color. "You really shouldn't have underestimated me," I said quietly. "I know everything you and your parents tried to do, and I made sure none of it can touch me again." She looked panicked now. "Evan, you don't understand. It was their idea." "No," I interrupted. "You signed your name. You made it yours." Her eyes filled with tears. "I just wanted security." "You never." "Security doesn't come from control," I said. "It comes from trust. And you killed that the night my parents froze outside while your family partied in my living room." She didn't have an answer. She just sat there, silent, like the weight of what she'd done was finally starting to sink in. When I stood to leave, she whispered, "So that's it." I paused. "No, Rachel, that's just the beginning." Because while she thought she was walking into a reunion, I'd already spoken to Marcus about something bigger, something that would change the balance of power completely. See, when her parents tried to use my property as collateral, they listed their LLC under the same registration number they used for other investments. Marcus traced it. That LLC had several unresolved violations and a pending investigation for misuse of funds in another state. By attaching my house to their assets, they'd accidentally linked themselves to my mortgage application on record. It meant their investment umbrella now had my name connected to it. And legally, that gave me the right to request an audit. Marcus grinned when I told him. "You realize what this means, right? You can make their entire business unravel just by shining a light on it." I didn't react right away. I wasn't sure if I wanted revenge yet, but I knew I wanted accountability. So I waited. I let them think I was finished. Rachel stopped messaging after that night, though I occasionally saw her parents' car drive past the neighborhood, probably checking if I'd moved out. I didn't. Instead, I fixed the house, repaired the fence her father claimed was an eyesore, repainted the kitchen walls, brought back my old furniture from storage. Then, One Saturday morning, my parents came over for breakfast. My mom brought a fresh batch of her cinnamon rolls, and my dad walked around the house quietly, nodding approvingly. He turned to me and said, "Looks like a home again." That meant more than any apology could have. By winter, life felt different. Simpler. Better. My promotion became official, and my team started winning recognition for our projects. I took my parents on a small vacation, just a few days by the coast, nothing fancy, but it was the first trip we'd taken together in years. On the last night there, as we sat watching the sunset, my dad said something I'll never forget. "You know, son, people think strength means standing your ground. But sometimes, it's knowing when to rebuild from scratch." He was right. I wasn't the same person who once begged for peace in his own home. I'd learned that sometimes walking away isn't weakness, it's strategy. When we returned, Marcus called with an update. "The Coopers LLC is under review," he said. "The audit you triggered unearthed some interesting things. Fraudulent transfers, tax evasion, the works." I didn't smile. I just exhaled slowly. Let it play out. Because for the first time, I wasn't chasing revenge. I was watching justice unfold, naturally, quietly, perfectly. And deep down, I knew this was only the start. It was strange how quiet revenge felt. No shouting, no grand gestures, just calm precision. I didn't even think of it as revenge at first. It was just balance. The kind the world eventually finds when people push too far for too long. After Marcus confirmed the audit was moving forward, I stayed patient. The Coopers were wealthy, connected, and arrogant enough to believe the rules didn't apply to them. That kind of confidence made them sloppy. They didn't realize how deep Marcus had gone into their records or how much evidence he'd already secured. Their financial empire was like a mansion built on a swamp. Looked solid from the outside, but one good storm could sink it. And that storm was forming quietly, right under them. Over the next few months, I became someone entirely new. Someone who didn't just survive chaos, but learned to use it. My work life flourished. The infrastructure project I led ended up being a huge success, earning national attention. My name started showing up in tech journals, and one day, I got an email from a major firm offering me a position as Director of Systems Engineering, nearly double my salary. I accepted. And here's the thing. The new company wasn't just bigger. It had partnerships with several investors, one of which, ironically, happened to overlap with the Coopers network. Through those connections, I learned something that made everything click. Susan and her husband weren't just running that family business of theirs. They were quietly funneling money through shell entities, hiding assets from taxation, and manipulating ownership claims on several properties, including mine. That was when I realized I didn't just want to win back my peace. I wanted to make sure they could never do to anyone else what they'd done to me. So I started gathering everything. Not like before, when I was just documenting what they'd done to me personally. Now I was pulling corporate filings, financial transfers, shell company registrations, emails that Marcus obtained through legal discovery. I had dates, names, and signatures that connected Susan's LLCs to tax-dodging schemes that would make any auditor's jaw drop. Marcus looked through the folder one night and let out a low whistle. "Evan, this isn't just petty fraud. This is federal-level stuff." I nodded. "Good. Then it deserves a federal audience." "Do you want to go public with it?" he asked. "Not yet," I said. "I want them to see it before everyone else does." We set a timeline. Once the audit results came in, it would trigger an automatic review by the state's financial bureau. That alone could freeze their assets temporarily, but I wanted to add a personal touch before that happened. So I waited for the perfect opportunity. It came on an early spring weekend when Rachel called unexpectedly. Her voice was careful, cautious, like someone walking barefoot on glass. "I heard about your new job," she said. "Congratulations." "Thanks," I replied simply. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything." There was silence on the line. Then she added, "My parents have been under a lot of stress lately. Some kind of audit. I think it's gotten serious." I kept my tone neutral. "That's so." "Yes. They're saying it's political. You know how that goes." I didn't respond. She hesitated, then said, "Would you mind if I stopped by to talk? It's not about us, I promise. I just don't know who else to turn to." I agreed. When she showed up, she looked nothing like the Rachel I used to know. The perfect hair, the designer bag, the polished confidence, gone. She looked tired, nervous. She sat on the couch, clutching her purse. "They're panicking," she said. Their accounts are being reviewed, and the business lawyer is saying they might lose everything. Mom keeps insisting it's a misunderstanding, but I've never seen her this scared. I listened quietly. Then she looked up at me, her eyes searching. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? I didn't answer. Her lips trembled slightly. Evan, did you do this? I leaned back, meeting her gaze. Rachel, your parents built their empire on lies. All I did was shine a light on it. She stared at me, shocked. You could have gone to jail with them. Your name was on some of those filings. Not anymore, I said calmly. That's the difference between me and them. I fix my mistakes before they destroy me. She looked down, voice breaking. They don't know what to do. They're selling their cars, their vacation homes, everything. Mom said she might have to file bankruptcy if the audit expands. I didn't say it out loud, but in my mind, I thought, good. After a moment, she whispered, you really meant it that night, didn't you? When you said it was just the beginning. I nodded once. You made sure my parents felt small in front of your family. Now your family knows what it feels like. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I never wanted it to go this far. Neither did I said quietly. But sometimes people don't learn until they lose something real. She left soon after, and I knew she'd run straight back to tell them what I'd said. I wanted her to. Because that same week, the audit report was finalized, and Marcus filed a formal complaint attaching every piece of evidence we'd collected. It triggered a full investigation. Within a month, news broke. Local real estate investors under investigation for financial fraud. It wasn't a front-page scandal, but it was big enough to make their world implode. Their accounts were frozen, several properties seized, and their reputation, their precious, spotless reputation, was gone. Susan Cooper went from hosting galas to being photographed leaving a courthouse with reporters asking, Mrs. Cooper, care to comment on the investigation? I saw the footage once. She looked smaller, fragile, the same way my mother had looked that night outside my house, clutching a cookie box in the cold. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel guilt either. I just felt balance. Then came the unexpected twist. One of the seized assets under their LLC was a property they'd bought using collateral from my house. When the investigation unraveled the transactions, the ownership of that property reverted to me. It wasn't worth millions, just a modest lakeside house, but it was poetic justice. The very thing they tried to steal from me ended up giving me something better. When I went to see it, I stood on the porch overlooking the water, the breeze cold but clean. It wasn't fancy. The floors creaked, the paint peeled, but it was mine. Completely mine. That night, I called my parents. I want you to see something, I said. They came the next morning, bundled in coats. My dad stepped onto the porch and whistled. Well, would you look at that, he said. You've got a lake now. My mom laughed softly. Are we allowed in this one? I smiled. You're the only ones who are. We spent the day cleaning, fixing things, making it livable. It wasn't about the property. It was about reclaiming what mattered. Family, dignity, peace. As the sun set, I stood by the dock with my dad. He put a hand on my shoulder and said, You didn't just get even, son. You got free. He was right. I didn't need their apology. I didn't need them to understand. Their empire was collapsing, and I had something better, a quiet, steady life built on truth. But as I watched the lake that evening, I knew one thing for sure. The Coopers weren't done yet. People like them never accept defeat easily. And when they came knocking again, desperate and broken, I'd be ready. It didn't take long for them to come crawling back. About a month after the investigation went public, I got a knock on my door one quiet Sunday afternoon at the lake house. I was sanding the porch railings when I heard it. 3 slow knocks, hesitant but deliberate. When I opened the door, I wasn't surprised to see them standing there. Susan, her husband Martin, and Rachel. They looked nothing like the polished, untouchable family I used to know. Martin's once perfect hair was gray and thin, his tailored coat replaced with something wrinkled and ordinary. Susan's eyes were red and swollen, her posture still proud but trembling slightly, as if even standing upright took effort. Rachel lingered behind them, hands clasped, her expression unreadable. I didn't say a word. I just stepped aside, letting the cold air fill the silence. Susan was the first to speak. Evan, she said, her voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. We came to apologize. Her words hung in the air like dust. I imagine you did, I said evenly, wiping sawdust off my hands. She swallowed hard. We've lost everything. The house, the business, all of it. We're being audited by multiple agencies. They froze our assets, seized accounts we've had for decades. Martin's name is being dragged through the papers. Martin looked at the ground. We can't even pay our lawyers anymore, he muttered. For a brief moment, I almost pitied them. Almost. Then I remembered the night my parents stood outside in the freezing wind, their hands shaking as they waited to be let in. I remembered my mother's cracked voice asking, "Why won't they let us in?" That memory hardened whatever sympathy I might have had. Susan took a step closer. "We were wrong about you," she said. We thought we were helping our daughter secure her future, but we destroyed it instead." Rachel finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Evan, I didn't know it would go this far. I never meant for any of this to happen." I met her eyes. "You meant every word the night you called my parents embarrassing. You meant it when you ignored my mom's calls. You meant it when you tried to put your mother's name on my house. Everything after that was just consequence." Her eyes filled with tears. "I was stupid. I thought you'd always forgive me." "I did," I said quietly, "until I realized forgiveness doesn't fix people who aren't sorry." Susan wiped her face. "Please," she said, "we need help. The lawyers said if we can't settle, we could lose everything, even the retirement fund. You have connections now. You could speak to someone, get them to stop." I asked. She nodded desperately. "You could save us." I stared at her for a long moment. The woman who once smirked at my father's calloused hands was now begging with her manicured fingers trembling. I thought of my parents, their warmth, their humility, their quiet strength, and how this woman had made them feel small for simply being kind. I took a deep breath. "You know," I said slowly, "my dad used to fix cars for free when people couldn't afford it. He'd say, 'Everyone deserves to get where they're going.' I always thought that meant helping people no matter what. But now I realize something he never had to say out loud." They watched me, waiting. I continued, "You can't help people who keep slashing their own tires." Susan's expression broke. "Evan, please." I held up a hand. "No, you had every chance. You mocked my parents, manipulated me, tried to take everything I built. And now that it's gone, you want the same people you crushed to pull you back up." Rachel whispered, "So that's it." I nodded. "That's it." Martin finally looked up, anger flashing for the first time. "You'll regret this," he said bitterly. "You think you're better than us? You just got lucky." I stepped closer, calm but firm. "No, Martin. I got smart. There's a difference." He looked like he wanted to say more, but Susan grabbed his arm. "Let's go," she said softly. They turned and started down the steps. Rachel hesitated, glancing back at me one last time. Her voice cracked as she said, "I hope you find peace, Evan." "I already did," I said, and I closed the door. I stood there for a long while after they left, listening to the wind move through the trees. It wasn't triumph I felt, it was release. The kind that comes when a weight you've carried for years finally falls away. That night, I sat outside on the porch, the lake still and quiet under the fading sunset. My parents came by later with dinner, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, my mom's famous apple pie. My dad leaned on the railing beside me, watching the water ripple. He said, "Your mom told me they came by." "They did," I replied. "You say what you needed to say?" "Yeah," I said softly. And for once, I didn't say it angry. He smiled faintly. "That's how you know it's over." Mom came out carrying plates and said, "You boys better eat before it gets cold." We sat there together, eating in comfortable silence, the way we used to. No drama, no noise, no pretending, just peace. As the sky darkened and the first stars appeared, I looked at my parents, at the people who'd been humiliated, disrespected, and yet somehow never let bitterness touch them. And I realized something. They hadn't just raised me to be kind. They'd raised me to understand what real strength looked like, quiet, patient, and unstoppable when tested. When they finally left that evening, my dad paused by his car and said, "You know, son, I think your grandpa would have been proud." "Why is that?" I asked. He grinned. "Because you didn't just rebuild what they tried to break. You made it better." After they drove off, I stood on the porch one last time, staring out at the reflection of the moon on the lake. The house behind me was small, simple, and entirely mine. And as the night air settled, I whispered to myself, not out of spite, not out of anger, but out of gratitude. Here's to finally letting the right people in. I'm 33, and I used to think my family was just a little dysfunctional, not toxic. You know how some families argue about small things, like who's hosting Christmas or which movie to watch? Mine argues about money, control, and who's the responsible one. Spoiler, that's me. Or at least, that's what everyone says right before asking me for something. My name's Luke, and for most of my adult life, I've been the one holding everything together. The one who never said no because I thought family meant loyalty, even when it hurt. I was raised by parents who believed helping each other was sacred, but over time I realized that in their dictionary, helping meant Luke pays for it. I'm not exaggerating. For years, my brother, Ryan, has been the golden child, the one who has potential, even though he's 31 and hasn't held a job longer than 6 months. Meanwhile, I've worked my way up from sleeping in my car after college to managing a small but successful tech consultancy. My parents love reminding everyone how proud they are of my work ethic, right before they guilt me into wiring Ryan another few hundred for groceries or rent. At first, I didn't mind. Ryan was struggling, and Mom always said, "You're doing so well, it's just temporary." But temporary turned into years. I'd pay his bills, cover his car repairs, even help him with his credit card debt, just until he gets back on his feet. Except somehow, his feet never touched the ground. The real problem started 2 years ago when my dad added both my parents and Ryan to a family joint account. It was supposed to be for emergencies. Back then, I didn't think twice. I trusted them. I deposited a large chunk every month, figuring if anything happened, we'd be covered. It wasn't until much later that I realized that emergencies apparently included my mom's new kitchen backsplash and Ryan's trip to Vegas. I remember seeing a withdrawal for $3,800 labeled car maintenance. I asked what it was. Dad said, "Ryan's car broke down. Family emergency." Then I found a photo of Ryan at a pool party holding a champagne bottle. I confronted him once, quietly. I told him I wasn't mad, just disappointed. He shrugged and said, "Relax, man, you're loaded." That word, loaded, stuck in my head. It made me realize that somewhere along the way, I'd stopped being a brother and turned into an ATM. Still, I didn't do anything drastic. I told myself it wasn't worth the fight. Until this past December. The first text came on a Sunday afternoon. "Send me your card info, or don't bother coming to Christmas." It was from Ryan. No greeting, no explanation. Just that. I thought it was a joke at first. I even laughed. I replied, "Very funny." He sent a follow-up message. "Not joking. Mom said you'd help with gifts this year since I'm behind on rent. Just send it." I stared at my screen, speechless. He wasn't asking, he was demanding, like it was my duty. I called Mom, hoping to clear things up. "He's being ridiculous," I said. She sighed like I was overreacting. "Oh, Luke, don't make a big deal. You know he's had a hard year. He just needs a little help." "Then why did he threaten me?" I asked. "He didn't mean it like that. He's just stressed." "Mom," he said, "send your card info or don't bother coming." Silence. Then, "Well, if you're going to be difficult, maybe it's best you don't come this year." That sentence cut deeper than I expected. It wasn't just guilt, it was a threat. Family or compliance. Choose one. I decided to set a boundary for once. I texted Ryan back. "Then we're not coming." I felt a weird mix of relief and sadness. For the first time, I wasn't giving in. The next morning, I woke up to a message from Mom. "Don't be petty. I already sent $6,200 from your account to help him with rent." At first, I thought it was some kind of twisted joke. Then I opened my banking app. It wasn't a joke. The withdrawal was real, from the joint account I'd set up years ago. My stomach dropped. I checked the account history, and that's when I saw it. Not just one transfer, but dozens over the past few months. $300 here, $1,200 there. The kind of slow leak you only notice when the dam breaks. I sat there on the couch, shaking. I tried calling her. No answer. I called Dad. He picked up after a few rings, sounding half asleep. "Luke, what's wrong?" "You know exactly what's wrong," I said. "Mom took $6,000 from my account without permission." "It's a family account," he replied calmly. "Your mom was just trying to help your brother." "You're overreacting." "Overreacting? That's theft, Dad." He sighed. "Son, you make good money. Why are you acting like this is the end of the world?" Something inside me snapped. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the principle, the constant disrespect, the entitlement that had been eating away at me for years. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just said, "I'm done," and hung up. All day, I couldn't focus on anything else. My mind kept replaying the years of just this once, and he's your brother. I thought about the times I paid their bills without complaint, the vacations I funded, the times I skipped out on things I wanted because I didn't want to cause tension. And this was how they thanked me, by stealing from me and calling me petty when I objected. That night, I poured myself a glass of whiskey and opened my laptop. I wasn't going to act out of anger, but I wasn't going to let it go either. I started by calling the bank, explaining the situation. They froze the joint account immediately and flagged the transfer as suspicious. Then they walked me through filing a fraud report. The irony wasn't lost on me when the form asked for the suspect's name. I typed Linda, my mother's last name. It felt surreal, like I was betraying them. Except, hadn't they already betrayed me? Once the report was filed, I sat there staring at the confirmation email. My hands were shaking, but it wasn't fear. It was adrenaline. Years of resentment boiling into a single moment of clarity. But I didn't stop there. If they wanted to treat me like an outsider, I'd give them a reason to. I compiled screenshots of the transactions, texts, and emails into a neat little PDF. Then, with a calmness that surprised me, I sent it to every relative who ever told me to be nice to my family. The subject line read, "For transparency." I hit send and went to bed. When I woke up the next morning, my phone was buzzing nonstop. 83 missed calls, 27 voicemails. A text from Dad. "Your mother's in tears. Are you happy now?" I stared at the screen for a long time, my heart pounding. A small, sharp part of me wanted to reply with a simple yes. But I didn't. I just sat there, wondering how far this would go, and whether I'd finally crossed a line I couldn't come back from. And that's when something unexpected happened. When I say the next few days were chaos, I mean chaos. It started with the calls. I ignored the first dozen, but they just kept coming. Mom, Dad, Ryan, even my Aunt Claire, the one who always swore she stayed out of family drama. My voicemail was full of half-yelled messages that all blurred together. "You went too far, Luke. This is a private family matter. Do you realize what you've done to your mother?" The one that stuck out the most, though, came from Ryan. His tone wasn't even angry, it was smug. He said, "Guess you finally showed your true colors. Bro mom's crying her eyes out. Dad's furious, and you're sitting there acting like a victim. Congrats, you're the reason Christmas is ruined." Then he laughed. "You know, you've always thought you were better than everyone, but you're just as pathetic as the rest of us. You just hide it better." I replayed that message more times than I care to admit. Not because I believed it, but because it confirmed what I'd suspected for years. Ryan didn't see me as family. He saw me as leverage. By the end of the week, word had spread through the entire extended family. My cousin Aaron texted me a novel-length paragraph about how money shouldn't come between loved ones. My uncle tried to play mediator, suggesting I take a deep breath and reverse the freeze. My grandmother, the one person I actually respected, left me a quiet voicemail that just said, "I know you're hurting, Luke, but don't let anger make you like them." That one hit different. Because she was right, I was angry. But anger wasn't the only thing I felt. There was grief too. It felt like I'd finally buried something I didn't even know was dead. The illusion that my family loved me unconditionally. Mom didn't stop. Every day, she'd send guilt-laced messages. "I can't believe you'd humiliate me like this. You've destroyed our reputation. Your father can't even go to work without people asking questions." That last one made no sense. My dad works at an insurance office, not the White House. But logic was irrelevant now. This wasn't about reason. It was about control. Then she started using nostalgia as a weapon. She'd send old photos, me and Ryan as kids in matching pajamas, Christmas mornings with ribbons everywhere, me at 10 years old holding the ugly sweater she'd knitted. Her caption would read, "Remember when family meant something?" It stung. I'd scroll past them at night, thumb hovering over block, but I couldn't do it. Not yet. Part of me still hoped she'd realize what she'd done and apologize. But that part of me was about to die too. 3 days after the report was filed, my bank called. The fraud team wanted clarification. Apparently, someone had tried to reverse the freeze by calling in, pretending to be me. They had my full name, date of birth, and even the last 4 digits of my social security number. The rep said, "We flagged it immediately. The voice didn't match your ID on file." I didn't even need to ask who it was. I hung up and sat in silence for a long time. The sound of the refrigerator humming was the only thing keeping me grounded. Then, without thinking, I texted Mom. "Did you try to impersonate me to the bank?" No reply. 10 minutes later, Dad called. I picked up. "Luke," he started, his tone that familiar fake calm he used whenever he was hiding something. "Your mother didn't do anything wrong. She was just trying to sort things out." Sort things out. She tried to access my account after stealing from it. He sighed. "You're making this sound worse than it is. We were just trying to clean up the mess." "The mess you made." "Luke." "No, Dad. You don't get to do this anymore. You don't get to talk to me like I'm a stubborn child while you two cross every line imaginable." There was silence on his end. I could almost hear him grinding his teeth. Then he said, "You've always had a temper. I think it's best if you stay away until you've cooled down." "Trust me," I said, my voice shaking. "That won't be a problem." That night, I turned off my phone. But of course, that didn't stop them. The next morning, I woke up to messages from friends. Friends, not family. Screenshots of Facebook posts. My mom had made a long, public family update, painting herself as a devastated mother whose successful son had turned cruel and vindictive over money. The post read like a script for a bad soap opera. "We raised him with love. We sacrificed everything for him. And now he's punishing us for helping his brother stay afloat. I don't even recognize him anymore." The comments were a circus. Old family friends offering sympathy. Neighbors writing, "You were always such good parents." And Ryan, of course Ryan, chiming in with, "He's been bitter for years." Some people forget where they came from. That one pushed me over the edge. I spent hours pacing around my apartment. Every time I thought I'd calmed down, another notification would pop up. More comments. More pity for the poor mother. I tried to tell myself it didn't matter, that anyone who really knew me wouldn't believe it. But the truth? It did matter. Because reputation was the one thing I'd worked my whole life to protect. That night, I got an email from HR at my company. Someone had sent them an anonymous tip claiming I was under investigation for financial misconduct. My stomach dropped. I called my boss immediately. Thankfully, he knew me well enough to see through it. He said, "We'll handle it internally. Don't worry. But, Luke, maybe sort things out at home." That sentence, "sort things out at home," made me laugh. Because there was no home anymore. Just a family-sized graveyard of trust. When I checked my email again, I noticed something else, a PayPal alert. Someone had tried to send $500 using my old linked account. The name on the attempted transaction? Ryan, last name. The audacity was almost impressive. So I called him. I needed to hear his voice. He answered on the second ring. Well, the banker speaks. "Did you really try to use my PayPal?" He snorted. "It was a mistake. I thought it was mine." "You thought my account, under my name, was yours?" "Don't make it sound weird, dude. It auto-filled." "Ryan, that's fraud." "Oh, relax. You're such a drama queen. You always have to make yourself the victim." "Victim? You stole from me." He laughed again. That lazy, hollow sound I'd grown to hate. "You're acting like you're poor. You make more in a month than I've made all year. What's a few thousand to you?" I almost hung up right there, but I didn't. Instead, I asked something I'd never asked before. "Ryan, do you even feel bad about any of this?" He paused, not out of guilt, but out of confusion. "Feel bad? For what?" "For treating me like a wallet." "You're not a wallet," he said quickly. "You're family. Family share." That was it. That was the phrase that shattered whatever sympathy I had left. Family share. The same words my mother used when she justified taking from me. The same line they'd weaponized for years to keep me compliant. I ended the call without another word. For a while, I sat in the dark, trying to figure out what to do next. But before I could decide, there was a knock at my door. It was my neighbor, an older woman named Patricia. She looked concerned. "Luke, honey, are you okay? Your mom's been calling everyone on the street asking for your address. She said you're having a breakdown." That was the moment I realized this wasn't just family drama anymore. It was a smear campaign. I thanked her, closed the door, and leaned against it. My hands were trembling. My mother, the woman who used to tuck me in with bedtime stories, was now calling neighbors to paint me as unstable. For what? Because I finally stood up for myself? That night, I checked my email again. Another message from Mom. The subject line read, "Please talk to us before things get worse." I didn't open it right away. I just stared at it. Then, slowly, I clicked. It wasn't an apology. It was an ultimatum. If you don't lift the freeze and withdraw the report, will have no choice but to take legal action for defamation and emotional distress. Your father is already consulting an attorney. You're destroying this family, Luke. Please stop before you lose everyone. There it was. The line in the sand. Not an ounce of remorse. Just manipulation wrapped in legal threats. I closed my laptop, took a deep breath, and stared out the window. Snow was falling softly against the city lights, coating everything in silence. Somewhere out there, families were laughing, decorating trees, sharing meals. Meanwhile, mine was burning, and I hadn't even begun to fight back yet. It had been 2 weeks since the fraud report, and I thought I'd finally reached the peak of my family's manipulation, but I was wrong. What came next didn't just sting, it shattered something fundamental inside me. I hadn't spoken to anyone since that last email. My phone stayed on silent, my blinds half drawn, my life reduced to muted routines. Work, home, sleep, repeat. I tried to convince myself that silence was peace, that cutting them off meant freedom. But deep down, I was waiting for them to realize what they'd done and reach out with something resembling remorse. An apology, a sign that maybe, just maybe, they understood the gravity of what they'd done. Instead, I got a summons. It arrived on a gray Thursday afternoon, in a plain envelope that looked like junk mail. Inside was a letter from a law firm, the same one my father used to handle his insurance disputes. The document inside accused me of financial misconduct, reputational harm, and emotional distress. It claimed I'd intentionally weaponized private financial data to humiliate family members, and that my actions constituted defamation and harassment. At the bottom, in the plaintiff section, were 2 names, Linda and Michael, last name. My parents. I sat at my desk, the letter trembling in my hands. For a few seconds, my brain refused to process it. It felt like a prank, something so absurd it couldn't possibly be real. But it was. The envelope had the firm's embossed logo. The language was formal. The date was current. They had actually done it. My parents were suing me. I don't even remember standing up, but I found myself pacing across my apartment, muttering, "No, no, no, no," like saying it enough times would reverse it. My first instinct was disbelief, then anger, then something darker, grief. It felt like losing them all over again, but this time there was paperwork to make it official. I called the number on the letter. The receptionist's voice was coldly professional. "Good afternoon, Hallow and Pierce Law Offices. This is Luke, last name," I said. My voice cracked. "I just received a summons from your office. I need to speak to whoever filed this." "One moment, sir." A click. Then another voice. Older, smooth, deliberate. "This is Attorney Pierce. How can I help?" "Yeah. Hi," I said, trying to steady my breathing. "You're representing my parents?" "Yes. Mr. and Mrs. last name." "They're my parents," I said. "Do you understand how insane this is? They stole from me." He paused. "Our clients allege that you filed a fraudulent report and disseminated private information with the intent to cause harm." I sent proof. Bank statements, text messages, everything. They took money that wasn't theirs. "I'm not here to argue the facts, Mr. last name. My advice is that you retain counsel before responding." And then he hung up. I just stood there, holding the phone to my ear long after the line went dead. It wasn't until my neighbor's dog barked that I snapped back to reality. By the next morning, I called a lawyer of my own. Her name was Dana, sharp, direct, no nonsense. After I forwarded her everything, she called me back 20 minutes later. "Luke," she said, "you're not going to like this, but legally they can file this kind of claim. It won't hold up in court without evidence of defamation, but they're using it to scare you. It's leverage." Leverage for what? To make you drop the fraud report. And there it was again, that word, leverage. My family's favorite currency. She told me not to respond directly to them, not to engage, to let her handle the communication. I agreed, but something inside me felt off. I wasn't afraid of court. I was afraid of what this said about who they'd become. Or maybe who they'd always been. 2 days later, I got another message, this time from my cousin Aaron. It read, "Luke, I need to tell you something before it gets worse. Your mom's been going around telling everyone you forged her signature on the joint account. She's showing screenshots of some email proof." My blood ran cold. Forged her signature? I hadn't even touched her account. She was the one who used mine. I told Aaron to send me whatever she had. 10 minutes later, my phone pinged with screenshots. My mother had taken an old email I'd written, one where I mentioned transferring funds between accounts years ago, and edited it. She'd changed dates, amounts, and even inserted fake lines that made it look like I'd been manipulating their finances. Then she'd shared it with the rest of the family, along with a story about how I'd been doing shady things behind everyone's back for years. I stared at the screen in disbelief. My own mother had fabricated evidence to make me look like a criminal. I called her, I don't even know why. Maybe part of me still wanted to believe there was a misunderstanding. She answered on the second ring. Luke. Her voice was soft, almost rehearsed. I was hoping you'd call. What did you tell people? Excuse me. Don't play dumb, Mom. You sent out fake emails saying I forged your signature. Do you realize that's a crime? I didn't fake anything. I just showed people what you've been doing. You moved money around without permission. Without permission? It's my money. Her tone hardened instantly. You always think everything belongs to you. You've never understood family. I laughed bitterly. No, I understand perfectly. Family means I work, you spend, and Ryan coasts. Don't you dare talk about your brother like that, she snapped. He's been through more than you'll ever understand. Oh, I understand perfectly. He's been through everyone's wallets. There was silence. Then, quietly, she said, You've always been jealous of him. That sentence hit me harder than I expected. Jealous? I repeated. Of what, Mom? His debt? His laziness? His constant freeloading? His heart, she said softly. He actually cares about people. You only care about money. That was the moment something inside me broke. Not a clean snap, but a slow, splintering crack that reached somewhere deep. All the years I'd spent trying to earn their respect, to be the good son, to help, it all turned to ash in that one sentence. I said nothing, just hung up. The next day, my boss called me into his office. He looked uncomfortable. Luke, he began, I got an anonymous package today. It had bank documents and a letter accusing you of embezzlement. I know it's nonsense, but I need you to understand how serious this looks. I froze. Wait, what? He slid the envelope across the desk. Inside were photocopies of the same doctored emails my mother had been circulating. Alongside them was a handwritten note. You should know the kind of man you're employing. I couldn't breathe. My mind raced through every possibility, every way this could have happened. But I already knew who sent it. My parents, or maybe Ryan, had taken this fight to my workplace. I left the office early that day, barely holding it together. On the drive home, I kept replaying old memories, family dinners, birthdays, my mom's laugh, my dad's advice, Ryan's stupid jokes. It felt like all of it had been rewritten, tainted. When I pulled into my apartment complex, there was a car already parked out front, my parents' old beige sedan. My heart dropped. They were sitting inside. My mom in the passenger seat, eyes red. My dad behind the wheel, jaw clenched. I didn't even get out of my car at first. I just sat there, watching them through the windshield. My mom gestured for me to roll down my window. I didn't. She got out and walked over anyway. Luke, please, she said, voice trembling. We need to talk. I opened the door, but didn't step out. About what? The lawsuit? The fake emails? The lies you're spreading? Tears welled in her eyes. We didn't mean for it to go this far. Then why did you sue me? She hesitated. Because you wouldn't listen. Listen to what? To reason. To family. You made us look like monsters. I stared at her. You are monsters. Her face crumpled. My dad got out of the car then, his voice firm. Enough. You've done enough damage, Luke. You're going to drop this report, and we'll make the lawsuit disappear. It's that simple. Or what? I asked quietly. He stepped closer. Or we'll make sure everyone believes our version. You might have money, but we have connections. Family. You'll be alone. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. I looked at them, two people I barely recognized anymore, and felt something I hadn't before, pity, because they didn't even realize how far they'd fallen. Then my mom said something that froze me completely. We didn't want to, but Ryan's going to testify that you forged everything. He's already written a statement. For a second, I thought I misheard her. He's what? He saw you using my laptop last year. He remembers you typing something about transfers. He's agreed to tell the truth. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd that laughter was the only thing left to do. You mean he's lying for you? My mom looked away. My dad didn't flinch. He's doing what family does, he said. That was it. The final betrayal. I shut my car door, rolled up the window, and drove off. leaving them standing there in the cold, looking small and distant in my rearview mirror. That night, I sat in my apartment, surrounded by silence. The city outside was alive, traffic, sirens, laughter echoing from nearby bars. But inside, it was just me, the hum of the fridge, and a realization I couldn't unsee. My family wasn't just broken. They were willing to destroy me to protect the lie they'd built. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure if I wanted to forgive them or make them regret ever underestimating me. Either way, the next move would be mine. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a minute. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces, my mom's trembling lip, my dad's cold stare, Ryan's smug little grin in my imagination, rehearsing the lies he'd tell under oath. It's funny, the kind of clarity that comes when your world collapses. You'd think I'd be angry, or pacing, or breaking things. But I wasn't. I just sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee gone cold, staring at the wall. It wasn't shock anymore, it was understanding. A brutal, hollow kind of understanding. I'd spent 33 years trying to be the good son, the one who helped, who stayed reasonable, who forgave. And where did that get me? Sued, betrayed, lied about. I'd become the villain in a story I didn't even write. The next few days blurred into one long, gray smear. I went to work, but I wasn't really there. I'd stare at my monitor, reread the same line of code 10 times, and forget what I was even doing. My coworkers noticed. One of them, Priya, pulled me aside. "Hey, Luke, are you okay? You've been off." I wanted to tell her everything. But where do you even start? My family's suing me because I refused to fund my brother's rent. It sounded ridiculous even in my head. So I just said, "I'm dealing with something personal." She nodded, gently. "Take care of yourself, okay? Whatever it is." That night, I came home to a letter slipped under my door. No envelope, no return address, just a folded sheet of paper. I opened it and immediately recognized the handwriting. My mother's. "Luke, please don't let this go further. You're hurting yourself more than you're hurting us. We raised you better than this. All we wanted was to make things right for your brother. He's been through so much. You've always had everything. You could have just helped. Please, drop the case. Let's fix this as a family." There was a postscript. "Your father says you'll regret this if you let it reach court." I folded the letter, put it in the drawer, and poured myself a drink. For a few weeks, that became the routine. Work, silence. Legal updates from Dana. More silence. Every call or email from my family went unanswered. Every message went straight to archive. But their absence didn't bring peace. It brought something worse. Emptiness. Then came the headlines. It started small, a local gossip Facebook page run by some old woman in my parents' neighborhood. She posted, "Sad to see a family torn apart by greed. A certain tech consultant has turned on his own parents for money. Truly heartbreaking." It got shared hundreds of times. Then a small online outlet picked it up, one of those local digital tabloids that survives on rumor. They didn't use my name, but the details were obvious. Successful young entrepreneur files fraud case against his elderly parents. I remember sitting at my desk reading it, my hands cold, my stomach twisting. I called Dana immediately. "Can we do something about this?" She sighed. "Not really. Not unless we can prove they gave the story directly. It's speculation, not defamation. So they get to destroy my reputation, and I just watch." Sometimes silence is the best response, Luke. Let them talk. Truth has a way of surfacing. I wanted to believe that. But when clients started hesitating to renew contracts, when an investor paused a deal until things cleared up, I realized silence doesn't stop damage. It just makes it quieter. Still, I didn't retaliate. Not yet. I think part of me was too tired to fight. I was living off caffeine and spite, but even that has limits. There were days I didn't speak to anyone at all. My apartment felt smaller every night. The noise in my head was so constant I started taking long midnight walks through the city just to drown it out. The sound of passing cars and faraway sirens became my therapy. Then one night, as I was walking past a diner near my block, I saw something that stopped me cold. Through the window, sitting in a booth with his phone out, was Ryan. I froze. He hadn't seen me yet. He was laughing at something on his screen, fork in one hand, milkshake in the other. There was a woman sitting across from him, smiling, someone I didn't recognize. Curiosity got the better of me. I stepped closer, careful not to catch his attention. The woman said something, and Ryan leaned back, grinning. "My brother? Oh, he's fine. He's just having a little meltdown. It'll blow over once he realizes mom and dad aren't backing down. The woman frowned. You think he'll really drop it? Ryan smirked. Please. He always folds. He's soft. Always has been. Worst case scenario, mom settles it out of court and I get my rent covered again. I don't know what I felt first, rage, disbelief, or heartbreak. Maybe all three at once. But I remember walking away before he could see me. I didn't trust myself to stay calm. That was the night I decided something had to change. I stopped waiting for justice to arrive on its own. If my family wanted to play dirty, I could get my hands dirty too. Except I'd do it cleanly. Strategically. Quietly. It started with the bank. I called and asked for every statement, every record tied to the joint accounts, not just recent ones. The manager hesitated until I mentioned the fraud report on file. Within a few days, I had boxes of documents delivered to my door. I spent nights going through them line by line, highlighting every withdrawal, every suspicious transfer, every expense labeled family fund. What I found was worse than I expected. They hadn't just taken from me. They'd been moving money between accounts under my name for years. Tiny amounts at a time, just enough to fly under radar. It was systematic, deliberate. I didn't tell Dana yet. I needed more. So I dug deeper. I checked tax filings, property records, even PayPal receipts. That's when I discovered that my parents' mortgage payments for their vacation home were being drafted from an account partially under my SSN. They'd literally tied me to their debt. I don't remember the last time I felt that specific kind of nausea. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was identity theft. A whole new level of violation. But instead of rage, what came next was something calm. Cold. I started making a folder, an archive, really. Every document, every message, every edited proof my mom had circulated. I timestamped everything, labeled it, cross-referenced it with dates. It became an obsession, but it was the first time in months that I felt focused. I realized something important in that process. My family thrived on chaos. They wanted me reactive, emotional, explosive. Because as long as I was angry, I wasn't strategic. So I stopped giving them reactions. When my dad called again, his number flashing across the screen while I was in the middle of cataloging withdrawals, I didn't even flinch. I just silenced it. When mom sent another guilt-soaked email about restoring peace, I archived it without opening. When Ryan texted, "Hey, heard you're in deep. Should have just played along, man," I blocked him. It was almost peaceful, that silence. I started sleeping again, eating again, working again. Slowly, pieces of my life began to reassemble, not perfectly, but enough. A few weeks later, Dana called with an update. Their lawyer reached out, she said. They want to meet. Mediation. I hesitated. Why? Maybe they're realizing this isn't going their way. What happens if I say no? Then we go to court. I took a breath. Set it up. That night, I reopened the drawer with my mother's letter, the one where she said I'd regret this. I read it one more time, quietly, then placed it in my evidence folder. Because regret wasn't what I felt anymore. What I felt was readiness. And maybe, just maybe, the faint spark of something I hadn't felt since this whole nightmare started. Power. But I didn't show it. Not yet. Let them think I was broken. Let them think I'd surrendered. Because the truth was, I'd just started building the kind of case that would not only expose them, but make sure they could never do it to anyone again. The mediation was scheduled for a Thursday morning in February. The kind of day that feels like it's holding its breath, gray skies, air thick with fog, and a silence that made every car engine sound louder than it should. I sat in the waiting area of the law office, dressed in a dark suit I hadn't worn since my cousin's wedding, hands folded on my lap, pretending I was calm. Inside, I wasn't. I'd spent the last month quietly preparing, gathering everything. Every record, every statement, every edited email, every PayPal log. I'd even found a digital forensics expert who confirmed that the proof my mother sent around had been tampered with. Metadata doesn't lie. It showed edits, timestamps, even her device name. I had enough evidence to make them look like the villains they were, but that wasn't what I was after anymore. I didn't want just to win. I wanted understanding, or at least to see the look on their faces when they realized how far they'd pushed me. When the conference room door opened, Dana gave me a small nod. "They're here," she whispered. I followed her in. Mom was sitting across the long oak table, clutching a tissue like a prop. Dad sat beside her, arms crossed, jaw set. Ryan leaned casually in his chair, wearing a smug half grin that made me want to walk out before it even started. Their lawyer, a gray-haired man named Pierce, greeted me with professional politeness, the kind that doesn't mean a thing. We took our seats. Dana placed a neat binder in front of me. My mother avoided eye contact. Pierce started first, his tone rehearsed. We're here today in good faith, hoping to reach an amicable resolution before things escalate further. My clients wish to express their regret over how personal this has become. Regret. That word made me laugh under my breath. He continued. They maintain that their intentions were never malicious, merely misunderstood. They'd like to propose a mutual withdrawal of claims to preserve family relationships. In plain English, drop your fraud report. We'll drop the lawsuit. Dana looked at me, silently asking if I wanted to speak. I nodded. Mr. Pierce, I began, keeping my voice steady. Before we discuss anything, I'd like to clarify what exactly your clients are denying. Because as I understand it, they stole from me, forged documents, and then tried to destroy my reputation. Correct? Pierce hesitated. My clients disagree with your characterization of events. I opened my folder. That's fine. I brought something that might help jog everyone's memory. I slid a printed report across the table. It was from the forensic analyst. Highlighted in yellow, document modified on January 4th, 10:42 p.m., from device registered to Linda Dash, last name, iMac. Mom's eyes flicked to it, then to me. Luke, where did you? From your own computer, apparently. She looked to Dad, panicked. He said nothing. Pierce adjusted his glasses. We can review that privately after. Oh, there's more, I said calmly. I handed him another set of pages, bank statements this time. That's every withdrawal from our joint account since 2019. Notice the pattern? Always in round numbers. Always right before vacations, home renovations, and birthday parties that somehow involved you two surprising Ryan with new gifts. Ryan scoffed. You're seriously tracking every dollar? That's pathetic, man. I turned to him slowly. You tried to use my PayPal to send yourself $500. Want me to show the screenshot? His smirk faltered. Dana stepped in then, her voice measured but firm. We're prepared to take this to court, Mr. Pierce. Our client has documented evidence of fraud, forgery, and defamation. If this continues, we'll also pursue criminal charges. The room fell silent. My mother started crying softly, dabbing at her eyes. We never meant for it to get this far, she whispered. You've always been so cold, Luke. So distant. We were just trying to help your brother. By stealing from me? I interrupted. By lying to my boss. By spreading rumors online? That's your definition of help. She looked up, mascara streaking. You don't understand what it's like being a parent. You help your children however you can. Even if one of them ruins the other? No one answered. The mediator, a quiet woman who'd been scribbling notes this whole time, finally spoke. It seems emotions are running high. Perhaps we can take a short recess? I didn't need a recess. I was done talking. I stood, gathered my folder, and looked directly at my parents. You said I'd regret this if I let it reach court. You were right. I regret it took me this long to stop pretending we were still a family. Then I walked out. Dana followed me into the hallway. That was intense, she said softly. You okay? Not really. But I will be. And that was the truth. Because walking out of that building, something inside me clicked into place. I wasn't their victim anymore. I wasn't their safety net, or their scapegoat, or their silent provider. I was finally free, and with freedom came something dangerous, clarity. That night, I went home and did something I should have done years ago. I logged into every financial account I owned. Every business tie, investment, retirement fund. I stripped their names from everything. Closed every joint account, changed every password, filed new tax separation forms. Then I called the bank again and added a fraud alert with biometric verification, no phone approvals, no paper signatures. If anyone wanted access, they'd need my face. It felt cleansing, but I wasn't done. Over the next week, I contacted a few friends in the tech industry, people I'd helped over the years, clients who'd become allies. I told them what had happened, carefully, factually. One of them, a cybersecurity consultant, offered something interesting. You know, Luke, he said, if you wanted to, you could trace where some of those stolen funds went. Even beyond what the bank shows. Transfers leave fingerprints. Digital ones? I asked. He smiled. Exactly. Within a few days, I had a detailed log of every transaction that originated from those accounts, even the ones that had been hidden behind shell transfers and gift cards. And one of those led to something I never expected, a payment toward a small business LLC under Ryan's name. Apparently, he'd been running a music studio with friends, funded almost entirely by the money my parents siphoned off. That was my turning point. I didn't tell anyone, not even Dana. Instead, I started documenting again, not as a victim this time, but as someone preparing for the final act. While they thought I was backing off, I was collecting every nail for the coffin. I contacted the bank again and requested a full audit report, including every transfer flagged for suspicious activity. I called the credit bureau to verify all linked accounts under my Social Security. I even hired a private investigator, not to follow them, but to verify the assets they claimed in their legal filing. The results were illuminating. Ryan's studio? It didn't exist. The LLC was fake, a shell registered under a virtual address. My parents' financial hardship. A lie. They'd purchased a new vehicle 3 months earlier. And that mortgage debt they cried about? Paid in full. With my money. For the first time in months, I smiled. Not out of happiness, but from something colder. Satisfaction. They thought they'd buried me under manipulation, but all they'd really done was hand me the blueprint to dismantle them. A week later, Dana called. Their lawyer reached out again. They're suddenly interested in settling privately. Of course they are, I said. Tell them we'll think about it. But I had no intention of settling. Because I'd just learned something useful, something powerful. When people build their entire lives on lies, you don't need to fight them head on. You just need to pull one thread. The rest unravels on its own. So I kept quiet. I waited. I watched. I didn't know exactly when or how I'd strike back, but I knew I wouldn't rush it this time. Because the best revenge doesn't come from anger. It comes from patience, precision, and the truth. And when it was all ready, when every document, every receipt, every false statement lined up in perfect order, I'd make sure everyone saw exactly who my family really was. Until then, I'd let them enjoy their illusion of control. They had no idea what was coming. The mediation was the first act of the finale. The courtroom was the encore. I didn't expect fireworks. I expected the slow, clinical unspooling of the paper trail, but there was something satisfyingly theatrical about watching the whole thing happen in public, with everyone who mattered sitting in rows and pretending not to stare. Dana had warned me this would be messy. Civil cases take time. Don't expect a headline verdict tomorrow, she said. I answered her with the binder I'd built. Forensic reports, bank audits, the audit trail that showed money funneling from accounts tied to me into places it shouldn't have gone, the edited emails stamped with my mother's device ID, the PayPal attempts, the mortgage payments, the LLC that existed on paper and not in reality. We also had the PI report proving Ryan's shell company was a fake, registered with a mail forwarding service and run off a friend's couch. When the forensic analyst took the stand, he spoke human. He explained metadata like a teacher explaining a math trick to a class. Timestamps don't lie, device IDs stick, edits leave fingerprints. He showed the flowchart of transfers and the annotated email showing the alterations. It was dry, precise evidence, the opposite of the emotional shouting my parents had been using as a shield. My parents had their moment. They had peers pacing the perimeter, leaning on theatrics about a son pushed too far, memory lapses, the pain of broken trust. Dad's voice cracked in one testimony. Mom's hands shook. Ryan testified, too, reading a statement he swore was the truth, claiming he remembered seeing things that corroborated his parents' story. He spoke like someone reciting a line. But then Dana put the bank manager on the stand and asked about the call that tried to reverse the freeze. The manager described the voice mismatch, the IP traces that originated from a local library where a library card tied to Mom's name had been used to log into an account the night the edits were made. Pierce's eyes slid toward Mom and Ryan like they'd been caught with a hand in the cookie jar. The judge doesn't enjoy spectacle, but he does love clarity. The pattern was clear, repeated, unauthorized transfers, documents altered and circulated to create a narrative, attempts to weaponize reputation to intimidate. Court filings don't make for viral videos, but they make for decisive rulings. The judge found in my favor on the central claims. Unauthorized transfers were to be reversed where possible. A monetary judgment was issued for restitution plus damages, and he referred the matter to the prosecutor's office to look into potential criminal forgery and fraud. That last line in the judge's order felt like a tolling bell. The fallout was immediate in a way I hadn't fully anticipated. Within days, the bank reversed several of the suspicious withdrawals, and a hold was placed on other accounts tied to the transfers. My HR call became an apology email. "We regret the disruption." A client who'd been sitting on a renewal signed back on after a conference call that cleared my name. The local gossip page that had replayed my mother's version quietly took down the post and issued a correction after the paper trail was published. The editor emailed an apology. Social circles shifted. People who'd taken my parents' side suddenly went quiet when shown the evidence. Details travel fast when there's paperwork to back them up. My parents reacted like anyone cornered by their choices. First denial, then bargaining, then shame. There was the expected cycle of messages, contrite emails, offers to repay, pleas for family counseling, but also new things. Neighbors avoiding them, the retirement group at Dad's office whispering, invitations drying up. My mom's friends stopped answering calls. The woman who'd run the neighborhood gossip feed sent a short, embarrassed note. "I didn't know the whole story. I'm sorry." Ryan reacted worse. He'd been banking, literally and figuratively, on the idea that I couldn't or wouldn't fight back. Once the transfers were traced and his LLC dissolved under investigation, the people who'd given him small favors stopped answering. His studio partners distanced themselves when checks bounced, and the virtual mailbox returned mail marked inactive. He called me once during all of this. A short, choking thing where he tried to explain, to apologize, to beg. I let it go to voicemail. He left another message of someone trying on remorse, but I'd heard that voice before on the mediation tape and in the emails he'd sent his friends. It sounded rehearsed. The criminal referral meant I had to relive a lot of the details with detectives, interviews, signed statements, a forensics team reviewing the same files Dana's people had. That part was oddly cleansing. You tell the truth again and again, and each telling takes the sting out of the story. The investigators were professional and quiet. They didn't want drama, just facts. When the prosecutor called to say they were opening a formal inquiry into the possibility of forgery, it landed on me like someone switching on the lights. Not vindictive, corrective. There were losses, too. Some relationships that had always been conditional on me, keeping the peace, evaporated almost immediately. A few relatives, people who demanded I be the family ATM, sent terse messages asserting they were disappointed. A handful of mutual friends took sides. It stung, but it also made the margins clear. People who'd always been there because of what I could provide thinned out. And then there was the quiet resolution. The judge's restitution paid back a good portion of what was taken. The bank cleared my reputation internally. My boss publicly cleared me in a company meeting. Better yet, he offered support for any fallout. The investor who had paused returned the next quarter with stronger terms after seeing the judgment and the audits. It wasn't a fairy tale where everything bounced back overnight, but stability returned on its own schedule. The hardest part was family. They were not dead to me in the melodramatic sense I'd once imagined. They were smaller. Phone calls stopped meaning the same thing. I stopped expecting apologies that would never fully repair things. We reached a practical separation. Contact would be limited, communication channeled through counsel when necessary, and personal boundaries enforced with the same rigor I used for my business. I didn't gloat. I didn't dance on their reputation. I simply stepped away. On the first quiet holiday after the judgment, instead of the forced dinner with strained smiles and hollow gifts, I went to a small restaurant with a few friends who had been steady through all of it. We ordered too much food, laughed about stupid office politics, and drank coffee that wasn't accompanied by familial tension. It was ordinary and small and perfect. That night, after I returned home and cleared the table, my phone buzzed. One new message, a short text from Dad. No excuses, no pleading, just 2 words. "We're sorry." I read it twice, then set the phone down. I thought of the long months of catalogs and emails, of tracking transfers and building binders, of sleeping and not sleeping, of walking past the diner where Ryan once laughed with his phone. I thought of the weight that had finally been lifted because I'd chosen to stop carrying it. I put my hands on the window and watched the snow come down in the streetlight, slow flakes turning the world soft and quiet. For 33 years, my family had taught me how to give until it hurt. That night, I finally learned how to take care of myself. I didn't answer the phone when it rang again. I didn't need to. I felt, for the first time in a long time, entirely present in my own life. My name's Carl, I'm 29, and I've always been the punching bag of my family. Not in the physical sense, but in the way every family dinner, every gathering, every holiday somehow circled back to jokes at my expense. My parents had a way of disguising cruelty as just teasing. My older brother Mark was the golden child, and my younger sister Rachel was the delicate one who needed more attention. Me? I was the one who was supposed to toughen up, laugh along, and accept the role they'd carved out for me. For years I did. I let it roll off my shoulders, smiled through the digs about my cheap clothes or my tiny apartment, and pretended their laughter didn't sting. But under that practiced smile, resentment was quietly building like steam in a kettle. The dynamic had always been the same. My dad worked in finance, the type of man who measured worth by cars, houses, and bank accounts. My mom played the perfect hostess, endlessly reminding us that appearances are everything. Mark followed in Dad's footsteps, climbing the corporate ladder with his chest puffed out, while Rachel leaned into being the perpetual child, no matter how old she got. When I chose a different path, starting my own small business instead of joining the corporate machine, they laughed. They said it was cute that I wanted to play entrepreneur. Whenever I mentioned my work, the room would go quiet for a beat, then someone would change the subject like it wasn't worth acknowledging. That silence cut deeper than the jokes. I'll never forget one dinner in particular, a few years back, when I showed up straight from a long day at work. My car had broken down the week before, so I'd been taking the bus everywhere. I was tired, but I was proud. I just closed my first major deal, one that would keep my business afloat for the next year. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd ask how I was doing, give me the smallest bit of encouragement. Instead, my dad raised his glass and smirked. Here's to Mark's new promotion. Meanwhile, Carl's still riding public transport. Don't worry, son, someday you'll make enough for a used car. Everyone laughed. Even Rachel, who had no job at the time, giggled behind her hand. I remember forcing a chuckle, nodding along, but inside, I felt like I was shrinking. That night, lying awake in my apartment, I made myself a promise. I wouldn't let them see me break. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of being right about me. I would work harder, smarter, and quietly build something they couldn't laugh off. I wasn't chasing their approval anymore. I was chasing the look on their faces when they realized they'd underestimated me. That thought became my fuel. Every long day, every setback, every doubt, I kept replaying that dinner in my mind. Their laughter echoed, and I turned it into drive. Fast forward a few years, and things changed. Slowly, then all at once. My business grew. What started as a tiny consulting service turned into a firm with major clients, international accounts, and enough revenue to not just survive, but thrive. I reinvested everything at first, living modestly while I expanded, but eventually, I reached a point where success wasn't just numbers on a spreadsheet. It was tangible. The kind of success you could touch, drive, and walk into. I bought a house. I bought a car. Not just any car, a Rolls-Royce. A dream vehicle, the kind of thing Dad used to point out in magazines and say, now that's a real man's car. I remember sitting in it the first time, hands on the steering wheel, and thinking, I wish they could see this. Not out of a need for validation, but because I wanted them to choke on their words. So when I got the call from Mom last month, inviting me to family dinner, I already had an idea forming in the back of my mind. She played it off casually, saying it had been too long, that we should all catch up like old times. But her tone gave it away. There was always a motive. Maybe Mark had some new promotion they wanted to gloat about. Maybe Rachel had another drama they needed to drag me into. Either way, I knew how it would go. I'd sit there, listen to them brag, then take the usual jabs about how I was still the odd one out. Except this time, things were different. This time, I had something they didn't know about, and I was more than ready to let it slip. The night of the dinner, I dressed simply. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed wealth. Just a clean button-up and slacks. I called my driver. Yes, my driver, and told him to wait outside the restaurant in the Rolls until I gave the signal. Walking inside, I already felt that old tension creeping in, like stepping back into a role I'd outgrown, but couldn't quite escape. The hostess led me to the table where my family sat, laughter spilling out before I even reached them. Dad was mid-story. Mark was nodding like a mirror image of him, and Rachel was sipping wine with a smug little smile. When they saw me, the greetings were warm on the surface, but underneath, it was the same condescension I'd grown up with. Dinner went as expected at first. Stories about Mark's big deal at work. Complaints about Rachel's busy schedule, which, from what I could tell, still consisted mostly of shopping and social events. Then came the inevitable turn toward me. Dad leaned back in his chair, that smirk I knew too while tugging at his mouth. "So, Carl, still taking the bus these days?" he asked, loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear. Mark chuckled. Rachel covered her smile with her hand, and Mom gave a pitying sigh like she was embarrassed for me. It was all so familiar. The setup, the punchline, the laughter at my expense. But this time, I felt something different. I didn't shrink. I didn't force a laugh. I stood up slowly, placed my napkin on the table, and let a smile spread across my face. "Funny," I said, my voice calm but steady. "My driver's been waiting outside in the Rolls for an hour." The laughter died instantly. Forks froze midair. Mark's smile faltered, Rachel's eyes widened, and Dad's face twitched like he wasn't sure he'd heard right. Mom was the first to break the silence, her voice barely above a whisper. "Rolls? What rolls?" The weight of the moment hung over the table like a storm about to break. And that's where everything shifted. The silence after my words felt heavy, like the entire restaurant had leaned in to hear what would happen next. My mom's voice, soft, shaky, still echoed in my head. "Rolls? What rolls?" Her fork rested forgotten on her plate, her eyes darting toward my dad as if he'd have an explanation, as if he could wave away what I'd just said with a clever quip. But Dad didn't speak. He just stared at me, eyes narrowed, lips pressed into a thin line, the way he used to look when I messed up as a kid and he was deciding whether to lecture me or ignore me. Mark shifted in his chair uncomfortably, and Rachel bit her lip like she was suppressing a laugh, though not the kind that came from amusement. It was nervous, like she didn't know which way this was going to swing. I sat back down slowly, letting my calmness settle over them like a blanket. I didn't need to explain myself, not yet. The beauty of the moment was letting them stew in it, letting them realize that for once, they didn't have the upper hand. And yet, true to form, Dad wasn't about to let me have the spotlight, even unintentionally. He cleared his throat, forcing a smirk back onto his face. "Carl, don't exaggerate. A Rolls? What? Are you test driving one from the dealership? I've read about people doing that, pretending for a night. It's not the same as actually owning one." His words dripped with condescension, like he was throwing me a rope out of embarrassment, but in reality, he was trying to yank me back down to where they thought I belonged. Mark jumped in, his voice smooth but smug. "Yeah, I mean it's fine, Carl. We all embellish things sometimes. It's like when Rachel said she was going vegan for a month, but still snuck chicken nuggets. No shame in it. But let's keep it realistic, okay?" His laugh was forced, but he tried to make it seem good-natured, like he was being the older brother who understood. Rachel, emboldened by Mark's tone, chimed in next. "Honestly, Carl, it's just, you've always been kind of dramatic about things. Remember when you got that tiny bonus at your old job and you acted like you'd won the lottery? I mean, a Rolls? That's just not you." She smiled sweetly, but her words were sharp, meant to slice through whatever confidence I'd gathered. The three of them laughed, not as loudly as before, but enough to try to drown out what I had said, enough to turn it into another family joke. My mom shook her head slowly, sighing in that disappointed way she had perfected. "We just want you to be grounded, Carl. We don't want you to build castles in the sky and then crash down when reality hits. It's hard enough watching you struggle without having to sit through this sort of fantasy." Her words stung more than the outright mocking. Because that was her trick. She made cruelty sound like care. Like she was doing me a favor by cutting me down, keeping me realistic. And in the past, I'd accepted it. I'd taken the comments quietly, tucked them away, and told myself I'd prove them wrong one day. But now, sitting there with their smug faces around me, I realized something. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. I already had. Still, I wasn't ready to show my hand. Not yet. Instead, I leaned back, giving them a small smile, the kind that was enough to make them uneasy but not enough to confirm anything. "Sure," I said simply, letting my words hang in the air. "Maybe you're right." For a moment, they seemed relieved, as if I was retreating back into the role they expected of me. But inside, my heart was pounding, not with fear, but with anticipation. Because I knew what they didn't. Outside, under the glow of the streetlights, sat the proof they couldn't deny. The roles wasn't a fantasy. It wasn't a loaner or a rental. It was mine, paid for in full. And when the moment came, they would see it with their own eyes. But instead of savoring dinner together like a family, the conversation only spiraled further into the old patterns. Dad launched into a story about how Mark had been headhunted by another firm, how recruiters were practically begging him to join. That's what success looks like, Carl, Dad said pointedly. When people recognize your worth and chase after you. Not when you chase after clients, scrambling to make ends meet. Rachel sighed dramatically, talking about how stressed she was planning her networking trip to Paris. She hadn't paid for it. Of course, Dad was covering it. But she framed it like she was an overworked businesswoman in desperate need of rest. Mom nodded along, patting her hand, cooing about how Rachel deserved it after all the pressure she was under. Meanwhile, I sat there, my plate barely touched, listening to them pile praise on each other while slipping in jabs at me. They didn't ask about my business. They didn't care. To them, I was still the same Carl who'd shown up years ago tired from taking the bus, trying to talk about a deal they couldn't be bothered to acknowledge. To them, nothing had changed. But they were wrong. And soon, very soon, I'd make sure they knew just how wrong. And that's when Dad leaned forward, his eyes narrowing, and asked the question that set the next part of the night into motion. So tell us, Carl, if this Rolls is real, why don't we see it for ourselves? Or are you afraid it might suddenly disappear? He said it with a chuckle, but I could feel the challenge in his words, the bait he was dangling. And I already knew exactly how I was going to answer. Dad's words hung in the air, a challenge disguised as humor, but I could feel the undercurrent of malice. Why don't we see it for ourselves? He'd said, his chuckle forced, his eyes daring me to either back down or double down. I could have laughed it off, brushed past it, but before I even opened my mouth, Mom's voice cut through the tension. Actually, she said smoothly, leaning forward with that deceptively warm smile she used when she was about to twist the knife, maybe we should see. It would be good for Carl to clear the air. You know, put an end to these stories before they get too big. She glanced around the table, and her tone changed ever so slightly, as though she were talking to the others, but deliberately loud enough for me to hear. I'd hate for him to embarrass himself like he used to. Remember the time he swore he was getting a promotion, and it turned out he was laid off? Laughter followed instantly. Mark smirked. Rachel laughed outright. Even Dad cracked a smile. And I just sat there, frozen in my chair. That moment, Mom dragging up one of the hardest, most humiliating times in my life and parading it as a dinner anecdote, hit me in a way their mockery hadn't in years. It wasn't teasing anymore. It wasn't just a jab. It was betrayal, plain and sharp. She knew how hard I'd fought after losing that job, how I'd clawed my way into building something of my own. And yet here she was, weaponizing that failure as entertainment. Mark raised his glass, grinning. Oh yeah, how could we forget? Carl, the dreamer. Always talking big. Always crashing harder. He clinked his glass against Dad's. But hey, at least it makes for good stories, right? Rachel chimed in, unable to resist. Or when he showed up to Christmas with that thrift store sweater and called it vintage. She snorted into her wine. We should start writing these down. Carl's greatest hits. It wasn't just their words. It was the way they looked at me. Like I wasn't an equal at that table. Like I was the entertainment, the clown who existed to make them feel better about themselves. I could feel my fists clenching under the table, nails biting into my palms. Part of me wanted to stand up, shout, walk out, leave them to their smug little world. But another part of me knew better. This wasn't the time to storm off. This was the time to listen, to let them think they'd won, because the higher they climbed on their tower of arrogance, the harder the fall would be. Still, in that moment, it hurt. I couldn't deny it. Sitting there, mocked by the very people who were supposed to be my family, dredging up old scars and laughing at the blood, I felt something inside me harden. Whatever fragile hope I had left, that maybe one day they'd see me differently, maybe one day they'd accept me, shattered. That night, they made it crystal clear. They didn't want to understand me. They didn't want me to succeed. They wanted me small, dependent, and ashamed. And then, As if the universe was testing just how much more I could take, Dad leaned forward again. His voice was quieter now, but it carried an edge I'd never heard before. You know, Carl, if this business of yours is real, maybe it's time you finally started giving back. Mark's been carrying more than his share, and Rachel has her needs. You could step up for once. Help out your family. I blinked at him, stunned. It wasn't just mockery anymore. It was a demand. A demand wrapped in guilt, as though everything I'd endured up to that point was suddenly erased, and now I owed them. They hadn't supported me when I was scraping by, hadn't even believed in me when I started out. But the second they caught the faintest whiff that I might actually have something, it wasn't pride or encouragement I saw in their eyes. It was hunger. Mom nodded along, her hand brushing against Rachel's. Exactly. You know how expensive her Paris trip is. And Mark has been so generous, always helping us out. It wouldn't hurt to ease the burden, Carl. That's what families do. Rachel set her glass down, giving me the sweetest smile she could muster. It'd mean a lot, Carl. You've always wanted to be included, right? This is your chance. For a moment, my throat tightened. They weren't just mocking me. They were circling me like vultures. I realized then what I hadn't wanted to admit. They didn't see me as family. They saw me as a resource, something to exploit once I became useful. That was the moment everything changed. The betrayal wasn't just their laughter or their stories at my expense. It was their intent. They didn't want me to succeed for me. They wanted me to succeed for them, so they could carve up the pieces and call it support. And as I sat there, forcing myself to stay calm while their voices droned on about how helping out was the least I could do, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. This wasn't going to end with me giving them what they wanted. It was going to end with them seeing just how badly they had underestimated me. I left that dinner feeling hollow, like someone had scooped me out from the inside and left nothing but a shell walking toward the door. Their words followed me, sticking to my skin like smoke. Always talking big. Step up for once. Help out your family. They rang in my ears with every step I took away from the restaurant. When I got outside, the Rolls was there, gleaming under the streetlights, the driver standing by, ready to open the door. For a second, I thought about signaling him, making a scene, letting my parents and siblings see the proof of everything I'd built. But I stopped myself. Not yet. Walking past the glass windows, I could see their silhouettes still sitting around the table, laughing like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't just been gutted in front of them. My hand tightened on the car door handle, and I whispered under my breath, "Not yet. You'll see soon enough." Then I slid inside. That night, lying in my bed, I felt the weight of years pressing down on me. I thought about every moment I had sat quietly while they mocked me. Every time I had swallowed my pride, telling myself one day it would be different. But it never was. I had been waiting for them to change, for them to finally see me as more than the family joke. But they never would. And the realization hit me harder than their laughter. Nothing I did, no amount of success, would ever earn me the acceptance I'd once wanted so badly. The pain of that truth cut deep. For years, I had fueled myself on the idea of proving them wrong. And now, even with everything I had, even with a life most people would envy, I still felt small in that restaurant chair. Because I'd been chasing the wrong thing all along. I didn't need them to approve of me. I needed to accept that their approval had never mattered in the first place. But that didn't mean I was going to let them walk all over me again. No, if they wanted to paint me as the failure, the dreamer, the broke one, they were about to find out how wrong they were. Still, revenge wasn't something I could rush. If I acted too fast, it would look like defensiveness, desperation. I needed patience, timing, precision. So I started planning quietly, in ways they wouldn't see coming. The first step was distancing myself. When Mom texted me the following week with a reminder about Rachel's Paris trip, I didn't respond. When Dad called asking if I could contribute something toward family expenses, I let it ring. When Mark emailed me a thinly veiled pitch about investing in one of his side ventures, I didn't even open the attachment. I went silent. The silence drove them crazy. They weren't used to me withholding, weren't used to me not playing the role they'd assigned me. For the first time, I wasn't accessible, wasn't available to be their punching bag or their wallet. And though the loneliness was real, because a part of me still longed for a family that didn't exist, I could feel a quiet strength building inside me. Still, it wasn't easy. There were nights I lay awake, wondering if I was wrong. wondering if maybe I should just give in, give them something, and maybe the pressure would ease. Maybe the mocking would stop. Maybe they'd let me in, even if it was only because of what I could provide. But then I'd remember Mom's smile as she dragged up my lowest moment, Dad's tone when he demanded I start giving back, Rachel's saccharine little, it'd mean a lot, Carl. And the ache in my chest would harden into resolve again. I was done begging for scraps of their respect. If they wouldn't give it freely, I'd take it by force, by showing them, in a way they couldn't ignore, that I wasn't the one who needed them. They were the ones who needed me. And as I quietly pulled back, letting them stew in confusion, the pieces of my plan began to form. I wouldn't lash out in anger. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me flinch. No, I would wait. I would build. And when the moment came, I'd turn the very things they mocked me for into the weapons of their undoing. The rock bottom wasn't just their betrayal at that dinner. The real rock bottom was the quiet acceptance that my family would never be the family I wanted. And the rise from that pit wouldn't be about them anymore. It would be about me reclaiming the power I'd given away for far too long. It was only a matter of time. The weeks that followed felt strangely quiet. For the first time in years, I wasn't tethered to the constant tug-of-war with my family. No answering texts that dripped with manipulation, no forced smiles at dinners where I was the butt of the joke, no hollow, maybe next time, excuses when they dangled invitations to events they knew I couldn't afford. I had stepped back completely, and in that silence, I found space to breathe. And in that breathing space, something shifted. My work took on a new rhythm. Without the weight of their voices echoing in my head, I poured myself fully into my business. Clients who had once seemed out of reach suddenly weren't. Deals I had been hesitant to chase now felt within my grasp. It was as if cutting out the poison had cleared my vision, and for the first time, I could see just how much I was capable of. Within 6 months, my firm doubled in size, then tripled. We landed a partnership with a major international company, something that sent ripples through my entire industry. Calls poured in. Invitations to conferences, keynote speeches, panels. My calendar filled faster than I could keep up. The long hours that once felt grueling now felt like momentum, like a wave I was finally riding instead of fighting against. And with that success came choices I'd never had before. The roles was just the beginning. I bought a penthouse overlooking the city, glass walls that let me watch the skyline at night like it belonged to me. I traveled London, Tokyo, Sydney, not for show, but because my work and my life demanded it. The boy who used to ride the bus, clutching his worn backpack while rehearsing excuses for why he couldn't join his family's expensive outings, now had access to the world. And with each step forward, the old insecurities slipped further away. But here's the thing, I didn't flaunt it. Not publicly, not yet. I didn't plaster my success all over social media. I didn't call home with updates. I let them think whatever they wanted to think. Because I knew, sooner or later, curiosity would eat at them. Their silence wasn't concern, it was calculation. If they weren't asking questions yet, it was because they were waiting for the right moment to circle back. And eventually, they did. It started with Mom. A casual message, as if we hadn't gone months without speaking. Carl, honey, how have you been? We miss you. Maybe you could come by for dinner, just like old times. I read it 3 times before setting my phone down, smiling faintly. Old times. As if those dinners had been anything more than stages for my humiliation. I didn't reply. Then Rachel reached out, sending me pictures from Paris with captions like, "Wish you could have been here," followed by the way, do you know a good way to transfer large amounts of money internationally? Asking for a friend. Subtle as a brick. I didn't answer. Finally, Mark called. He didn't even try for small talk. Look, Carl, I know we've given you a hard time in the past, but you know it's all love, right? Family's family. Anyway, I've got this new investment opportunity you might be interested in. Huge returns. If you want to finally get in on something big, now's the time. I hung up before he finished his pitch. The silence I gave them wasn't just distance anymore, it was control. For years, I had been the one waiting for scraps, waiting for them to acknowledge me. Now the tables had turned, and they didn't even realize it. They were the ones waiting, circling, probing for an opening. And I wasn't giving them one. Not yet. Instead, I focused on building something even stronger. My firm wasn't just profitable, it was becoming influential. We weren't just taking clients, we were shaping markets. I hired a team I trusted, People who respected me not because of my last name or because they had to, but because of what I could create. That respect, that loyalty, it was worth more than any hollow approval my family had ever withheld. And quietly, I began positioning myself for the moment I knew was coming. The moment they would demand proof. The moment their curiosity would crack open into desperation. I kept the roles, yes, but I also bought something subtler. A fleet of black sedans for my team, a driver service under my name. I invested in property, not just for myself, but for the firm. Offices in 3 cities, each one a monument to the empire I was building. Because when the time came, and I knew it would, I wasn't just going to show them a car. I wasn't going to flash one symbol of success and let them dismiss it as luck or timing. No, I was going to show them the full scope of what I had become in a way they couldn't spin, couldn't laugh off, couldn't reduce to a joke at dinner. The rise wasn't just about money or status. It was about control. For the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting to them. I wasn't scrambling to defend myself. I was moving deliberately, piece by piece, setting up a stage they didn't even know they'd be standing on. And when the curtain finally rose, they would find themselves not as the audience, but as the spectacle. The real turning point came on a gray Tuesday morning, the kind where the sky looked heavy and the city moved slower than usual. I was in my office, glass walls reflecting a skyline blurred by drizzle, when my assistant walked in with a folder. "You'll want to see this," she said, sliding it across my desk. Inside were details about a new client, except not just any client. It was the firm my dad had spent most of his career trying to impress. The one he'd always described as the pinnacle of the industry. The same company he used to wave around at dinner as proof of how close he was to greatness. And now, they weren't just working with us. They were working directly under me. My signature was the one on the dotted line. I leaned back in my chair, staring at that folder. My dad had spent years measuring me against a standard I never asked to be measured by. He'd mocked me for not getting there. And now, here it was, his holy grail, sitting in a folder on my desk with my name stamped across it. The irony was almost too perfect. But that wasn't the only thing. A week later, during a quarterly dinner hosted by the industry's top players, I overheard something that made my stomach tighten. My dad's reputation, the one he guarded like a crown, wasn't what it used to be. His firm was losing ground. Younger executives were circling like sharks, whispering about outdated strategies, poor leadership, missed opportunities. And in those whispers, one theme kept repeating. His time at the top was running out. That's when it clicked. All those little messages from my family, the sudden attempts to reel me back in, weren't just about reconnecting. They'd sniffed out something. Maybe they'd heard my name mentioned in circles they used to dominate. Maybe they noticed the silence and mistook it for arrogance. Either way, they had realized something was shifting, and they wanted in before it was too late. I didn't confront them. Not yet. Instead, I started gathering information. Quietly, carefully. Through mutual contacts, I learned that my dad's firm was bidding for a contract they desperately needed. Without it, they'd lose credibility, maybe even key investors. And guess whose firm was also on the short list for that same contract? Mine. When I first saw the email confirming it, I just sat there, staring at the screen. Years of being mocked for chasing something unrealistic. Years of being told I was the failure, the dreamer. And now, without even trying, I was in a position to decide whether my dad's firm sank or swam. It wasn't just poetic, it was power. Real, tangible power. And once I had that in my hands, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I began laying the groundwork. I didn't tell anyone, not my team, not my friends. I let the process play out naturally, made sure our bid was strong, airtight, impossible to dismiss. Every detail was double-checked, every presentation rehearsed to perfection. We weren't just competing, we were positioning ourselves as inevitable. Meanwhile, I stayed silent with my family. I ignored another dinner invitation, another friendly call from Mark, another text from Rachel that said, "Miss you. We should do something soon." I knew what they wanted, and I wasn't going to give them an inch until I was ready. But it wasn't only the contract that gave me leverage. Around that same time, I was invited to join a private circle of executives and investors, the kind of network where decisions were made before they ever hit the public. It was an inner ring my dad had dreamed of entering but never could. And suddenly, I was in the room, shaking hands, trading stories, earning respect not because of my last name, but because of what I'd built. I remember sitting at one of those meetings, a glass of scotch in my hand, listening to a conversation about upcoming mergers. Someone mentioned my firm as a rising power. Heads nodded around the table. And in that moment, I felt something I'd never felt before. Not just pride, not just vindication, but certainty. Certainty that I had crossed a line I could never be pushed back from. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I wasn't just proving them wrong. I was standing on ground they could never reach. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized the real revenge wasn't just going to be about showing them my success. It was about letting them walk straight into it, thinking they were in control, only to realize they'd been standing on my stage all along. The setup was complete. I had the contract. I had the network. I had the silence driving them mad with curiosity. All I needed now was the right moment to pull the curtain back. And, as fate would have it, that moment arrived sooner than I expected. It happened on a Saturday evening, the kind of night my family loved to orchestrate, an important dinner at a private club they'd been members of for decades. It was one of those places with heavy oak doors, white tablecloths, and a maitre d' who looked at everyone like they were auditioning for permission to belong. Mom called it a family tradition when she extended the invitation, but I knew better. They wanted to parade Mark's newest promotion, Rachel's Paris escapades, and Dad's enduring reputation, all while setting me up for the usual role of silent spectator. I almost didn't go, but then I thought about the timing. My firm had just been announced as the official recipient of that massive contract. Yes, the very one my dad's company had been clinging to as their lifeline. The news hadn't fully trickled down yet, but within days it would be public. And here they were, inviting me back into their spotlight. The stage wasn't just set, it was practically begging me to step on it. So I accepted. When I arrived, the evening began predictably. Dad was at the head of the table, glass raised, booming voice filling the room with tales of his industry. Mark sat beside him, nodding eagerly, occasionally chiming in with his own accomplishments. Rachel was draped in some designer dress, scrolling on her phone until she felt the need to chime in with a casual, "Oh, in Paris we did this," and Mom, of course, smiled approvingly at each of them, turning the spotlight on me only when she wanted to draw out another round of subtle jabs. "Carl," she said sweetly, after the appetizers had been cleared, "we never did see that roles you mentioned. You must forgive us for doubting, but you do have a tendency to exaggerate." She let the word linger, as if she were sprinkling seasoning onto the table. Mark leaned forward, smirking. Maybe he left it at the dealership again. Rachel giggled, twirling her wine glass. Or maybe it's like that job he said he had once. Remember how that turned out? The table erupted in laughter. And for a moment, I just sat there, letting the sound wash over me like I had so many times before. But this time, I wasn't shrinking. I wasn't swallowing my pride. I was waiting for the exact moment to turn their stage into mine. When the laughter died down, Dad leaned in, his voice low, almost conspiratorial. "Carl, listen. Enough games. If you really have something going, it's time to show it. Your family needs you. My firm needs a boost right now. You could finally prove yourself useful." I looked at him steadily, my expression unreadable. "Funny you mention that, Dad," I said, my tone calm, almost casual. "Because I heard your firm was banking pretty heavily on that upcoming contract with Harrow and Company." His face stiffened, just slightly, but enough for me to notice. "It's confidential," he said quickly. "How would you even?" I leaned back, smiling faintly. "Because they signed with us." The silence that followed was unlike anything I'd ever heard from them. No laughter, no smirking, just stillness. Rachel blinked at me, confused. Mark's jaw tightened, his smirk gone. Mom's hand froze halfway to her wine glass. And Dad just stared, his eyes narrowing as if he could will the words back into my mouth. I didn't gloat. I didn't raise my voice. I just let the truth sit there, heavy and undeniable. Finally, Mom broke the silence, her voice trembling. "Us? You mean your firm?" "Yes," I said simply. "We closed the deal last week. They're shifting everything over to us. It'll be announced on Monday." Dad's face turned a shade I'd never seen before, somewhere between pale and livid. Mark opened his mouth, then closed it again. Rachel's phone slipped from her fingers onto the table with a dull thud. I leaned forward, resting my elbows lightly on the table. "You've spent years telling me I was the failure, the dreamer, the one who never measured up. And while you were laughing, mocking, and dismissing me, I was building something bigger than all of you combined. Now the company you've been bragging about for decades, the one you pinned your reputation on, chose me. Not you. Not your firm. Me. The words weren't shouted, but they struck harder than any raised voice could. And watching their faces, watching the weight of reality settle on them, was more satisfying than I ever imagined. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Because as I sat back, calm and collected, I knew this wasn't just about the contract. This was about showing them, once and for all, that the roles had reversed. I wasn't the one sitting at their table, begging for approval anymore. They were sitting at mine, whether they realized it or not. And I had one more move to make that would seal it completely. The silence at that table stretched so long I could hear the faint clink of cutlery from other diners across the room. My family, always so loud, so sure of themselves, looked small for the first time in my life. Dad was the first to speak, though his voice had lost its booming confidence. This isn't possible. Harrow and Company has been with us for decades. They wouldn't just. He stopped, his words strangling in his throat, because he knew it was possible. He knew exactly why they would walk away, because his firm had grown stale, while mine was thriving. Mark leaned forward, desperate. Carl, listen. Maybe this doesn't have to be a competition. We could work together, merge our firms, even. With my experience and your lucky break, we could really. I raised a hand, cutting him off. It's not a lucky break, Mark. It's years of work you never saw, because you were too busy laughing at me. My voice was steady, calm, the way I'd always wished it could be in those moments they tore me down. Rachel's eyes glistened, her voice pitched higher than usual. Carl, you don't mean to just leave us out, do you? We're family. You know how much I've always supported you. Supported me? I asked, tilting my head. By mocking me at every turn? By treating me like a joke at Christmas? No, Rachel. You didn't support me. You drained me. And now you're only reaching out because you see something you want. Mom finally spoke, her voice trembling, but her words sharp as ever. Carl, you can't just turn your back on us. After everything we've done for you. I laughed quietly, shaking my head. Everything you've done to me, you mean? You mocked me when I was struggling. You paraded my failures in front of strangers. You only called when you thought I had something to give you. That's not family. That's exploitation. Their faces fell one by one, a slow collapse of the facade they had always worn. The smugness drained from Mark. The superiority bled from Dad. Even Mom's carefully cultivated composure cracked, her lips trembling as if she could no longer find the right script. I stood, placing my napkin neatly on the table. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. I looked at them, really looked at them, for the first time not as the family who had broken me down, but as people who no longer had any power over me. You asked why you haven't seen the roles, I said, my voice clear and steady. It's because I don't need to prove anything to you. But since you're so curious, I gestured toward the window. Outside, under the club's lantern lights, the Rolls-Royce waited at the curb. My driver stood by the door, polished and poised, the emblem gleaming like a quiet truth. Gasps came from the neighboring tables. Heads turned. My family's faces went pale. There was no denying it now. I leaned down slightly, just enough to meet their eyes. This is the last time I let you humiliate me. The next time you think of me as the family joke, remember this. The joke's on you. Then I turned and walked out. The hush of the dining room broken only by the soft click of my shoes against the marble floor. The maitre d' opened the door as if he'd been waiting just for me. My driver bowed slightly, pulling the door of the Rolls open. I slid inside without looking back. As the car pulled away, I caught one final glimpse through the tinted glass. My father slumped in his chair, my mother clutching at her pearls, my brother staring in disbelief, and my sister wiping at her eyes. The empire they had built on mocking me had crumbled in a single evening. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly free. The final line I carried with me, whispered only to myself as the city lights blurred past. I didn't just rise above them. I left them behind. My name's Ethan, I'm 29, and I never thought I'd be the kind of guy who'd get ambushed in his own house with a betrayal so theatrical it felt like it had been scripted by a soap opera writer with a personal grudge against me. But here we are. It was a Saturday, one of those weirdly quiet weekends where your phone doesn't buzz and you start to feel like the universe is giving you a break. I had driven into the city to spend a few nights at my friend Mason's apartment while he was out of town. just to get some air. You see, my family has always been a little invasive. Overbearing mom, golden boy younger brother, and a long-standing family tradition of treating my privacy like it was optional. After my breakup with Alyssa last year, a messy implosion I'd rather not relive, I needed distance. She'd cheated. It wasn't emotional or complicated. Just a cold betrayal I found out about through a friend of a friend who'd seen her on a date with my own brother. Yes, Jacob. Of course it was Jacob. And of course, he had the audacity to spin it like I didn't treat her right and that they just connected. My mom. She called it fate. I called it my cue to move out. I hadn't spoken to Jacob or Alyssa since. My parents kept trying to play mediator, inviting me to family dinners. I always declined. I had no interest in sitting across from a guy who used to borrow my car and now had apparently borrowed my fiancée. But today I just needed my laptop. I had left it charging in my old room, and I had a deadline for work I couldn't miss. My plan was to sneak in, grab the thing, maybe smile awkwardly at my dad if he was in the garage, and leave without having to relive the disaster of last year. Instead, I pulled into the driveway and immediately knew something was off. There were cars everywhere, packed down the street, the driveway, even on the neighbor's lawn. I actually had to park 2 houses down. I thought maybe it was a neighborhood barbecue or one of Dad's poker nights on steroids. But the second I stepped onto the porch and opened the front door, I heard it. Laughter, clinking glasses, music from a Bluetooth speaker playing some acoustic love song. And then I saw it. My living room, my former living room, was full of people. Not relatives, not childhood friends. Strangers. Maybe a few familiar faces, but not enough to make sense of the chaos. And above them, hanging between the windows, was a massive white banner with glittery gold lettering that said, "She said yes." I froze. I don't mean in a stunned, deer-in-headlights kind of way. I mean my feet literally stopped moving. Because just below that banner was Jacob, on one knee, holding out a ring to a woman who had, not too long ago, shared my bed. Alyssa had her hands over her mouth, tears in her eyes. The crowd was cheering, people had their phones out. The second she said, yes, the room erupted. I just stood there, a guy holding car keys in one hand and a bottle of iced coffee in the other, watching my ex accept a ring from my brother in the house I used to call home. No one noticed me at first. I was just part of the furniture, I guess. Then I heard her voice, "Mom." "Oh, Ethan," she said, as if she'd just seen me walking in from the grocery store. She actually smirked. I didn't even get a chance to ask what was happening before she said, "We didn't tell you. Didn't want drama. Didn't want drama." That's what she said. While standing in the middle of the engagement party, she helped throw for my ex and my brother. In my childhood home, using my name, apparently, for a $17,000 loan that neither of them had the credit to get approved for. That was her next line, by the way. "We used your name for the loan. It's just $17,000. Be happy for them." It took me a full 5 seconds to respond. Or rather, not respond. Because I didn't yell. I didn't throw the coffee or punch Jacob in the jaw like a lesser version of me might have imagined in a fantasy. I didn't even blink. I just nodded. Then I turned and walked past the guests, who were too busy celebrating to notice the tension in the air. I went upstairs. My old bedroom door still had the same squeaky hinge. Inside, my desk was exactly how I'd left it, laptop sitting on top with the charger wrapped neatly. I powered it up, opened a folder labeled contingency, and clicked on a file I'd never intended to use. But that's the thing about betrayal. It unlocks parts of you you didn't know were still alive. See, I'm not a hacker or anything, but I did co-sign that loan. I also handled most of the paperwork for the house when Dad refinanced it 2 years ago. Because unlike my brother, I actually pay attention to numbers. And I knew things. Things that no one else in that party knew. Things that could, very legally, make a mess of everything they had built on lies. And when I hit send, the first email went to the loan officer, detailing the fraudulent use of my signature, with a PDF of the forgery and screenshots of texts where Mom thanked me for helping without asking. The second email went to Alyssa's employer, because it turns out using confidential client info to qualify for loan income statements is a violation of her firm's ethics policy. The third? Well, that one went to the local realtor association. Jacob wasn't licensed, but he'd been showing houses under a friend's login. With proof. 9 minutes later, I walked downstairs. The party had shifted. Alyssa was clutching her phone, pale. Jacob was arguing with a man in a sport coat who looked like he was about to shove him. Mom was yelling something about misunderstandings and Ethan's overreacting. But no one was listening. One of the caterers packed up the cupcakes. Someone unplugged the speaker. The glittery, she said yes, banner had fallen on the floor. And me? I walked past them all, not saying a single word. That was the moment I knew I'd taken back control. But that wasn't the end. Not even close. I stepped outside as if I'd just wrapped up a regular family dinner. Calm, quiet, unreadable. My car was 2 houses down, but I took my time getting there. Not because I wanted them to chase after me. No, I knew they wouldn't. I walked slowly because I wanted to feel it. The air was different now. I wasn't the black sheep anymore. I was the ghost who'd come back not to haunt, but to erase. And they all knew it. I got into my car, started the engine, and checked my phone. For missed calls already. 1 from Mom. 2 from Jacob. 1 from an unknown number, probably Alyssa. I didn't answer. I didn't even block them. I just muted the thread. Let them panic. Back at Mason's place, I opened my laptop again and watched the replies flood in. The loan officer flagged the file for fraud within 20 minutes. My anonymous tip had teeth, screenshots of emails, a scan of my real signature next to the forged one, and even a voice message from Mom casually thanking me for making it all happen behind the scenes. It was one of those messages she left when she thought she was being sweet. The kind you save without meaning to, then forget about, until you need it. The email to Alyssa's firm? That one hit harder. She worked for a boutique investment company, the type that liked clean records and tighter compliance than a military base. In the files I sent, I included her falsified income documents and a breakdown of how she'd enhanced her salary to help Jacob get the engagement loan. Because a 6-month realtor assistant and a fired dog groomer don't exactly scream financially stable. Her company responded within an hour. HR flagged her file. She was placed on immediate leave, pending review. I may have grinned at that one. As for the third email, Jacob's little side hustle pretending to be a licensed agent, the moment I clicked send, I knew it would only take one curious agent in the Realtor Association to smell something funny. I even included a video Jacob once proudly posted to Instagram, giving a client tour inside a property he wasn't licensed to show. He thought it made him look professional. Turns out, it just made him look prosecutable. The next morning, the calls started in waves. First it was Mom. Voicemails ranging from gentle guilt-tripping, "Ethan, I know you're upset, but this was a beautiful night," to aggressive panic. "You need to fix this before it ruins your brother's life." And Alyssa's, "She still loves you, you know." I didn't listen to all of them, just enough to know where their heads were at. Still no accountability. Still no apology. Just panic that their little fantasy castle was sinking fast. Then Dad called. That surprised me. He usually kept out of these things. But his message was short. "You've made your point. I warned your mother this was too far. But you're playing with fire, son. You might get burned, too." Funny how the man who raised me to stand up for myself only decided to speak when his mortgage got tangled in the mess. I ignored it. 2 days later, the fallout started bleeding into public view. Jacob's name popped up in a local housing Facebook group. A woman posted that he'd shown her a house and told her to Venmo the deposit. She never saw the money again. My email to the Realtor Association had triggered a quiet investigation, and she was one of the first victims to be contacted. The post started gaining traction. Comments poured in. Others came forward. I watched from a distance, sipping my coffee, the same way they had all once watched me unravel and didn't lift a finger. Alyssa's firm released a statement 3 days later. "We take ethics violations seriously. This individual is no longer employed at our company." That was it. Clean. Final. Cold. Just how she liked her breakups. But the part that really sealed it? Mom called again, this time crying. "Ethan, they're threatening legal action against us. We put your name down, but it's your family. You wouldn't let them drag us into court, would you? You can undo this, honey. Just tell them it was a mistake." A mistake. That's what she called forgery, betrayal, and a blindsiding engagement party in my house with my name on the debt. I didn't say a word. Instead, I logged back into my laptop and opened the fourth file. It was an affidavit. A statement of events I had drafted months ago when I first found out about Jacob and Alyssa. At the time, it felt petty to finish it. Like I'd be admitting defeat if I put the pain into legalese. But now, Now it was a lifeline. Not for them, for me. Proof that I was done being the quiet one. The reasonable one. The one who always took the high road while they built bonfires on it. I sent it to my lawyer. The affidavit didn't just outline the forged loan. It included everything I'd swept under the rug for years, how I'd co-signed on other small things as a favor when Jacob's credit score tanked after he bailed on a lease, how my parents had asked me to front the deposit for Jacob's car back when he was trying to get back on his feet. Every IOU, every time they used my name, just this once. I had records, bank statements, emails, texts, even voice memos. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the pattern. And patterns, well, they have a tendency to convince courts more than sob stories do. My lawyer, Donna, was an old college friend turned legal hammer. I'd helped her through some ugly stuff when she was broke and juggling law school and night shifts. She said I was the first person who ever believed in her when even her own parents didn't. When I sent her the affidavit, her response came within 5 minutes. You want scorched earth or polite pain? I told her I wanted a permanent memory, something they'd never confuse with a misunderstanding. That afternoon, we drafted the first cease and desist, directed to Jacob and Alyssa regarding the fraudulent loan. The second was aimed at my parents, warning them that any further financial activity involving my name would be met with immediate litigation. I didn't want their apology. I wanted boundaries so hard and legal that they'd echo every time they looked at a pen. I'd love to say they reacted with humility, that maybe all of this cracked through whatever delusion they were operating under. But the thing about entitled people is they don't deflate. They burst. It started small. Mom sent a group text, me, Jacob, and Dad. I raised 2 boys. Not enemies. This isn't what your father and I worked our whole lives for. Please, be adults. I didn't respond. Jacob did. Just 2 words. You win. That one stung more than I expected. Not because I felt guilt, but because it was the closest he'd ever come to acknowledging that he knew what he'd done. That he didn't just trip and fall into my relationship. He made a choice. And when things went south, he doubled down instead of stepping away. 3 days later, the real hammer dropped. The bank called. They had officially flagged the $17,000 engagement loan as fraudulent because it was taken out under my name with falsified documents. And now I had an attorney representing me. My signature had been forged, my employment misrepresented, and my credit history manipulated. The entire thing unraveled in a matter of hours. The bank froze the disbursement. The check hadn't been deposited yet. Apparently, they were waiting for the right moment to cash it, probably to line up with their Pinterest-perfect honeymoon. Too bad the right moment never came. The engagement ring? Leased. Jacob had gone to one of those by now, pay later jewelers, figuring by the time the payments hit, they'd be deep into wedding planning and Mom would cover it. But now that everything else was crashing, he missed the first installment. The jeweler filed a claim and threatened repossession. The ring was still on Alyssa's finger when she got the notice. It's funny what happens when the money stops. The love story stopped too. Alyssa posted something cryptic on Instagram the next day, just a black screen with the caption, "Some things aren't meant to be." The comments were turned off, but not before someone DM'd me a screenshot. I didn't even open it. I just shook my head and closed my phone. Meanwhile, Dad showed up at my apartment. It was a bold move. I hadn't seen him face to face in over a year, even before this chaos. But there he was, standing in the hallway outside Mason's door. He didn't yell, didn't lecture, just looked tired. "I didn't know about the loan," he said. "Not until afterward." I raised an eyebrow. "But you didn't stop it either." He nodded, then sighed. "Your mother thinks it's still 1998. That everything can be fixed with a dinner and a guilt trip." I didn't respond. She made a mistake. A big one. "But Jacob," he looked down at the floor. "He's your brother." "No," I said. "He was my brother. Then he became my ex's new fiancé. And you all thought I'd be fine with it." He didn't argue. Just looked up at me with this sad, searching look. "What do you want, Ethan?" That was the first honest question anyone in my family had asked me in years. And I didn't even have to think. "I want peace. I want space. And I want my name off everything you people touch." He gave a single nod. No promises. No apologies. Just acceptance. Then he turned and walked away. The next morning, I got an email from the bank. They were officially closing the investigation and reversing the loan application. My credit score wouldn't be impacted. The case against Jacob and Alyssa, though? that was still open. If I wanted to pursue charges for forgery and misrepresentation, I could. Donna said we had a good case. But I didn't decide right away. Instead, I opened my laptop, pulled up my hard drive, and looked at the folder I hadn't touched yet. It was labeled Home Video. Inside, a 10-minute clip from the engagement party. Someone had accidentally airdropped it to me before I left. And in it, you can hear Alyssa laughing with my mother, saying something about how they knew I'd come around eventually. How Ethan was always too stiff, too logical, too safe. How I would thank them someday. I watched it twice, and then I hit forward. But I didn't send it to my lawyer. I sent it to every major contact in Jacob's real estate circles. And then, I started writing my own post. A public one. The moment the video leaked, things went from bad to irreversible. I spent the next day watching my phone light up like a Christmas tree in July. The video had gone viral. Not internet viral, but viral enough to spread across every group chat Jacob had ever flexed in. Realtor circles, local event planners, mutual friends who always stayed out of it. The 10-minute clip wasn't just a smoking gun. It was a full-blown arson confession. Alyssa, tipsy on champagne and self-righteousness, laughed as she explained the genius of using my name for the loan. Mom stood beside her, nodding along, saying, "He won't fight it. He never does. That's the thing about Ethan. He'll huff and puff, but in the end, he's still family." Wrong. So very, fatally wrong. The backlash was immediate. Real estate clients pulled out of deals. A community board Jacob moderated locked him out without warning. One of his old high school friends messaged me a screenshot of Jacob's desperate post trying to clarify the truth, claiming that I had misunderstood everything and that it was just a symbolic loan with no real consequence. Right. Because stealing someone's identity is always just symbolic. Then came the real consequences. 3 days after I sent the video, Jacob was served. Officially, Donna had filed a civil lawsuit on my behalf for identity theft, fraud, and reputational damage. I wasn't looking for jail time. I was looking for something that would stick longer. Something that would follow him around the same way this betrayal followed me. The court date was set within the month. He tried calling. I didn't pick up. Alyssa emailed, asking if we could talk. That maybe things went too far, and that maybe we could find peace, the three of us. She actually had the audacity to write, "It was never about replacing you. I just needed someone who believed in me." I stared at the message for a full minute before deleting it. What she wanted wasn't peace. She wanted the narrative back in her control. The pity, the reset. But I wasn't her emotional dump truck anymore. I wasn't the guy who held things together so everyone else could tear them apart. I was the line she couldn't cross again. Mom called, then called again, then texted, "This is your family. You've humiliated us. Is that what you wanted? To watch your brother be destroyed?" No, I didn't want to destroy Jacob, but I wasn't going to stop the damage he created from catching up to him. That week, the bank formally updated my credit report, my score untouched. Jacob's? Not so lucky. The loan application left a black mark under his name that would follow him for years. Alyssa lost her lease when her now unemployed fiancé couldn't co-sign anymore. They moved into my parents' basement. I found out through a neighbor that Mom was telling people I was going through something, that I wasn't well, that I needed time and prayer. Classic. What she didn't know was that I had quietly transferred all remaining assets tied to the family, ones I had partial control over from our old family trust, into my name. Not to keep them, but to close them. Done. Sealed. Final. I wasn't going to be the financial fallback anymore. They'd have to fund their own dysfunction. Jacob's court appearance came and went. He didn't contest anything. His lawyer tried to settle. Donna refused. We pressed forward, and while the judge didn't sentence him to jail, the ruling was clear. A guilty verdict, a 5-figure payout to cover damages, and a court-ordered restraining order to prevent further contact. His license to practice real estate was revoked indefinitely. I walked out of the courthouse into the sunlight and felt like I could finally breathe. No more dinners with hidden motives. No more passive-aggressive birthdays. No more "we're still family" manipulations. Just me, and the silence they'd always feared, my absence. The irony? In their effort to force me into their fantasy, recast as the villain for rejecting their happy little betrayal, they actually freed me. I moved states 2 months later. Got a loft apartment in a quieter city where no one knew who I was or who I used to be. I took a remote role with a company I respected and started focusing on photography again, something I gave up when Jacob and Alyssa used to mock it as a hobby, not a future. It paid more than their real estate scheme ever did. Last I heard, Jacob was working part-time in a furniture warehouse. Alyssa left him after 6 months. Apparently, she couldn't handle the emotional baggage that came with dating someone labeled a fraud. Mom tried to message me around the holidays. "We miss you," she wrote. "Please come home." I didn't reply. There's a peace that comes when you stop trying to fix people who enjoy breaking you. When I log into my laptop now, that folder marked contingency is gone. I deleted it the day the payout hit my account. Not because I didn't need it anymore, but because I didn't need them anymore. And the day you realize that, that's the real freedom. Not revenge, not courtroom justice, not public humiliation, but silence. Mine.